Am I the asshole for refusing to let my girlfriend drive my car because she's totaled 2 cars before? I, 24M, recently made one of the most significant purchases of my life, a 2019 Mazda 3. It's not a high-end luxury car or anything, but to me, it's special. It represents years of hard work and sacrifice. For context, I spent years driving around in old, unreliable cars, often juggling 2 jobs just to save enough to finally afford something better. When I bought this car, it felt like I was rewarding myself for all those long hours and tough days. It's not just a vehicle to me. It's a symbol of everything I've worked for. I take care of this car like it's my pride and joy. Every weekend, I give it a good wash. I always make sure the gas tank is at least half full, and I'm one of those people who parks at the far end of the parking lot to avoid dings and scratches. I know it might sound over the top, but this car is a big deal to me. Now, here's where the issue arises. My girlfriend, Emily, 24F, has been asking to drive my car. For a little background, Emily is an amazing person. I love her, and we've been together for over 2 years. But, and I say this with love, she is not a good driver. I'm not exaggerating when I say she's probably the worst driver I've ever met. Here's why I say that. In the last 2 years, she has totaled 2 cars. The first accident happened because she misjudged the distance while merging onto the highway and ended up slamming into another car. The second one, she reversed into a light pole in the middle of an empty parking lot and caused enough damage for the insurance to call it a total loss. She tailgates constantly. When I'm in the car with her, I often find myself holding onto the door handle because she drives so close to the car in front of us. I've had to remind her multiple times to back off because it feels like we're about to rear-end someone at any moment. And the kicker, she has openly admitted to me that she finds driving boring and doesn't like paying attention. She once said, "It's just so dull, so I zone out a little." Honestly, it's terrifying. To be fair, I've let her drive one of my cars before. This was when I still had my old, beat-up 2008 Honda Civic. I wasn't super attached to that car, so I didn't mind as much. But even then, she managed to scrape the side of the car while pulling into a gas station. After that incident, I told her, jokingly but seriously, "I'm never letting you drive one of my cars again." At the time, we both laughed about it, and I thought that was the end of the issue. Fast forward to now. With my new Mazda, Emily has been asking more frequently to drive it. At first, it was playful like, "Come on, let me take it for a spin." I just laugh and say no. But lately, her tone has changed. She's been more insistent, saying things like, "You act like I'm going to crash it or something." Or, "It's weird that you won't even let your own girlfriend drive your car." She seems genuinely upset that I won't let her behind the wheel. The tipping point came a few nights ago when we were driving to dinner. I was driving, of course, and she brought it up again. She said it made her feel like I don't trust her, and she found it insulting that I wouldn't let her drive. At this point, I decided to be honest. I told her, "It's not that I don't trust you as a person. I just don't trust you as a driver. I've seen how you drive, and I simply can't afford to have this car wrecked." She went quiet after that. The rest of the night was awkward, and I could tell she was upset. Later, when we got home, she told me that my comment really hurt her feelings. She said I embarrassed her and made her feel like she's incompetent. I tried to explain that it wasn't about trying to make her feel bad. It's just that I worked so hard for this car, and I'm scared of it getting damaged. But she said I need to get over it because accidents happen. To make matters worse, she started being a little petty about the situation. For example, she now refuses to let me use her computer, saying, "You might break it." Mind you, I've never done anything to warrant that kind of comment, so it feels like she's just trying to make a point. I've tried to talk to her about it, but she keeps saying I'm being controlling and unreasonable. So now I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for standing firm on this? On one hand, I feel like I have every right to protect something that means so much to me. But on the other hand, I don't want to make Emily feel like I don't respect or trust her. Am I overreacting here? Am I the asshole for stealing a present from a child? Last week, my office held its annual holiday party, which included a white elephant gift exchange. The invite specified it was for employees and their significant others, so while children were not explicitly discouraged, it was generally understood through casual office conversations that people weren't planning to bring kids. That made it a bit surprising when one of my coworkers brought his 10-year-old daughter to the party. She's somewhat of a regular at our office events. Her dad often brings her along, but this time, she was the only child present at what was very much an adult-focused gathering. For context, White Elephant is a party game where everyone brings a wrapped gift. The first person picks a present and opens it, and each subsequent participant can either open a new gift or steal an already opened gift from someone else. If your gift is stolen, you get to choose a new one or steal from someone else in turn. The game is meant to be lighthearted and fun, with a mix of serious, silly, and sometimes quirky gifts to keep things interesting. The party was going well, and when it was my turn to open a gift, I ended up with a humorous calendar. My husband, who was also at the party, picked out a set of novelty socks during his turn. A few rounds later, someone unwrapped a beautifully hand-carved and painted wooden dragon. My husband has been an avid player of Dungeons and Dragons his whole life, and he's always loved dragons. This gift was exactly the sort of thing that would make his day. Since both of us had already taken our turns, we agreed that if one of our gifts got stolen later, we'd make a beeline for that dragon. When the 10-year-old girl's turn came around, there were still plenty of unopened gifts and even a few kid-friendly options in play. To our surprise, she decided to steal the dragon, even though it wasn't necessarily a child's toy. At first, we found it kind of amusing. Kids often gravitate to things that catch their eye, and her enthusiasm was pretty adorable. But as the game progressed, we began debating whether it would be okay to steal the dragon if we got the chance. It was, after all, just a game, and part of the fun is that things get stolen and traded around. However, we also worried about whether it would come across as mean-spirited to take it from a child, especially since she was the only kid there. Our dilemma resolved itself a little while later when someone stole my husband's socks, giving him the chance to either open a new gift or take something from someone else. With a playful grin, he made a joking comment about being the Grinch and chose the dragon. The girl looked visibly disappointed but didn't make a fuss at the time. She quietly picked another gift and ended up with a remote control Harry Potter wand, which, to be honest, seemed pretty cool and age-appropriate. After the game ended, though, things took a bit of an awkward turn. The girl approached my husband and politely asked if he would trade the dragon for her wand. My husband, trying to stay polite but firm, explained that he was really happy with the dragon and didn't want to trade. She accepted his response without argument, but a little later, I stumbled upon her crying in the bathroom. This immediately made me feel awful. I went back to my husband, told him what I'd seen, and we decided to approach her father to offer the dragon back. We explained that we hadn't realized she'd been so upset and wanted to make things right. Her dad, however, surprised us by declining our offer. He said that it was a good life lesson for her. Apparently, before the game started, she had been talking about how excited she was to steal gifts from people and was fully aware of how the game worked. He reassured us that she wasn't angry or holding a grudge, but just needed a moment to process her disappointment. Even so, my husband and I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of guilt. While he's thrilled to have the dragon, it's now proudly displayed in our home. It's hard not to feel like it's tainted by the memory of making a child cry. To make matters worse, opinions in the office have been divided since the party. Some coworkers have told us we were completely in the right since the rules of the game allow stealing and the girl herself had stolen the dragon from someone else earlier. Others, however, feel that we crossed a line, arguing that as adults we should have just let the kid keep it, especially since she might not have fully grasped the competitive and sometimes ruthless nature of White Elephant. Now, I'm second-guessing everything. On one hand, I feel like her father should never have brought her to an adult-centered party where this kind of situation could arise. On the other hand, maybe we should have exercised more sensitivity, knowing she was just a kid. So, am I the asshole here? Were we wrong to take the dragon? Or was this simply a case of everyone playing by the same rules in a game that's not meant to be taken too seriously? Am I the asshole for wanting commitment before making a big move? I am a 21-year-old woman, and my boyfriend, who is also 21, and I are nearing an important milestone in our lives: graduation from college. We've been together for almost 2 years now, and by the time we graduate and potentially move, we will have been a couple for about 2.5 years. He has plans to attend graduate school, and where we move is entirely dependent on where he gets accepted. From the very beginning, I was completely on board with this plan. I've always supported him, and I love the idea of being there for him as he pursues his goals. But as the months go by and the reality of this move gets closer, I've started feeling increasingly anxious about what it means for me. The thing is, we've lived together on and off in the past, and everything was great. We didn't experience any major problems, so the idea of living together isn't the issue. What does weigh on me is the thought of uprooting my life to move out of state for him, potentially missing out on career opportunities in other locations, and making what feels like a huge commitment without much in the way of security in return. I know I would most likely be the primary breadwinner while he's working on his PhD, and even though he's hesitant to admit it, it's a reality I've already accepted. I don't mind supporting him financially while he focuses on his education because I genuinely love him and believe in his potential. However, what bothers me isn't the money or the move itself, it's the lack of clear commitment. We've had deep conversations about life goals, marriage, and what we both want for the future, and we are very much aligned in our values and vision. But when it comes to timelines, we're not on the same page. I think a proposal after about a year of living together in the new place would be a fair and reasonable timeline. That would give us both time to settle into our new lives and make sure we're still compatible in this next stage. He, on the other hand, feels differently. He's told me that he wouldn't feel comfortable proposing until he's midway through or closer to the end of graduate school. That means we'd be together for 5 to 8 years before even getting engaged. For me, that feels like an extremely long time to wait, especially considering the sacrifices I would be making for him now. When I expressed my discomfort with this timeline, he acknowledged my feelings but stood firm in his stance. Recently, I brought up my concerns again because I've started getting cold feet about the move. I told him that while I love him and want to be with him, I'm rethinking whether it's the right decision for me to put my career on hold or pass up other job opportunities just to follow him. After all, this is the start of my professional journey, and it's crucial for me to make decisions that are in my best interest. Right now, I don't feel confident about making such a big life change for a relationship that lacks the level of commitment I need to feel secure. This has led us to an impasse. Our relationship otherwise is fantastic. We love each other deeply, communicate openly, and share similar goals for marriage and children. My parents are also very supportive of me and share my reservations. They understand why I feel uncertain and agree that the level of commitment I'm asking for is reasonable. On his side, he has made it clear that he sees marriage with me in the future, but he just doesn't want to rush into it. From his perspective, he wants to make sure he's ready and financially stable before proposing, which I respect. But at the same time, it feels like he's okay with taking all the other steps, moving together, relying on me financially, without offering a similar level of commitment in return. It's frustrating because I feel like I'm giving so much to this relationship and showing how serious I am, but I'm not getting the same level of assurance back. It's not that I doubt his love for me, but his hesitance to propose, even after we've discussed this so many times, makes me question whether I'm making the right choice in prioritizing him over my own career and stability. So now, I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for wanting a stronger commitment before I agree to move out of state with him? Or am I being unreasonable in expecting him to meet me halfway on this? Am I the asshole for confusing my baby sister into believing I'm her mom? Hi everyone. This is my first time posting here, but I'm really in need of some advice. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially my mom, but I'm feeling so torn about whether I'm actually in the wrong here or just trying to do what feels natural. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and my family has been through a lot this past year. My dad passed away last year, which was devastating. Before that, my mom and dad had been divorced for a while, and they used to split custody of me. After the divorce, my mom remarried my stepdad, and they've been together for several years now. Things have been a bit chaotic at home lately because my mom gave birth to my baby sister a little over a year ago, and now she's 5 months pregnant with a baby boy. The issue started when my baby sister began teething, which I learned the hard way is a long and painful process for little ones. This happened at the beginning of summer break, and my sister was just crying so much because of it. She has a really loud cry, and it was tough to ignore, not just because of the noise but because it made me feel bad. She's so little and obviously in pain, and it broke my heart to think of her suffering alone. My mom and stepdad, on the other hand, didn't seem too concerned. My mom would let her cry it out in her nursery, saying that she needed to learn to self-soothe. But I couldn't just let that happen. Hearing her cry made me feel so helpless and sad, so I started going to her nursery to comfort her. I'd hold her, rock her, and let her chew on her fingers, which seemed to help a little. I even found some tips online, like using a cold cucumber to help her teething pain, and it worked like magic. I wasn't trying to undermine my mom. I just wanted my sister to feel better. At first, I thought this would be a temporary thing, like she'd stop teething after a while, and then everything would go back to normal. Boy, was I wrong. Teething comes in waves, and it felt like it never really stopped. Over time, taking care of her became a routine. I didn't mind, though. I genuinely enjoy spending time with her. I mean, I have my own life. I work a part-time job and hang out with my friends, but whenever I'm home, my sister is like my little shadow. She's always so excited to see me, practically jumping out of my mom's or stepdad's arms to get to me. The same thing happens at bedtime. My mom has a hard time putting her to sleep because my sister starts fussing and flailing, almost like she's trying to fight her off. But when I hold her, she just cuddles up to my chest and falls asleep right away. I didn't think much of it at first. I assumed it was just a baby being a baby, and that she found comfort in me the same way she might with any other familiar person. Fast forward to her first birthday party a few days ago, and everything came to a head. My sister didn't want my mom to hold her during the party. Not for pictures, not for the cake cutting, nothing. Every time my mom tried, my sister would cry and reach for me instead. I thought it was sweet that we're so close, but apparently my mom didn't see it that way. She was furious. Things got worse when my grandma made a comment, jokingly calling my sister and me Siamese twins because of how attached we are. I laughed it off, thinking it was just a cute way to describe our bond, but my mom clearly didn't find it funny. After the party, she pulled me aside and told me that I'm confusing my sister into believing I'm her mom. She said I need to stop doing so much for her and take a step back. She's angry that my sister prefers me over her and sees it as my fault for stepping in too much. But what am I supposed to do? Just ignore my sister when she cries for me? Pretend I don't hear her babbling my name? It's not like I'm pushing my mom out of the way or trying to replace her. Most of the time when I step in, it's because my mom or stepdad isn't available. Either they're napping, busy, or in the bathroom. I don't see how it's wrong to comfort her when nobody else is around. I understand why my mom feels hurt, but I don't think it's fair to blame me for responding to my sister's needs. I've always been someone she can rely on, and I like being there for her. At the same time, I don't want to make my mom feel like I'm taking over her role. I really don't know what to do, and I feel stuck. So, am I the asshole here? Should I be stepping back like my mom says? Or am I right to keep comforting my sister when she needs me? Am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my sister's kid unless she pays me? Hi everyone, I'm a 17-year-old guy, and I'm in a bit of a tough spot with my older sister, Anna, 25, who is a single mom to my 3-year-old niece, Emily. Let me start by saying that I love Emily. She's an adorable kid, and I've enjoyed spending time with her. However, babysitting her has become a huge responsibility, and I'm starting to feel overwhelmed by the expectations being placed on me. Over the past year, Anna has been asking me to babysit Emily quite a bit, usually 2 or 3 times a week. This usually happens in the evenings because Anna works late shifts. At first, I didn't mind helping out. I wanted to support her as much as I could because I know how hard she works to provide for Emily. But as time has gone on, it started to feel like I'm being taken for granted. Here's the thing. I'm still in high school and I already have a lot on my plate. Between school, part-time work, homework, and trying to maintain a social life, I barely have time for myself. Spending hours babysitting Emily eats into the little free time I have, and it's starting to impact my other responsibilities. I've fallen behind on schoolwork more than once because I was babysitting, and I've had to miss out on hanging out with my friends. What's frustrating is that Anna doesn't seem to appreciate how much effort I'm putting in. She never offers to pay me or even acknowledges the time and energy it takes to look after a toddler. Whenever I bring up how exhausting it can be, she brushes it off with, "Your family. This is just what family does." Last week, she texted me again, asking me to babysit while she worked late. This time, I decided to set a boundary. I told her I'd be happy to babysit, but only if she paid me something for my time. I suggested $10 an hour, which I thought was reasonable. After all, it's much cheaper than hiring a professional babysitter or paying for daycare. Anna didn't take it well. She got really upset and accused me of being selfish. She said I only cared about money and didn't understand how hard it is for her as a single mom. She kept saying things like, "I'm struggling to make ends meet, and all you care about is getting paid?" I tried to explain that it's not just about the money, it's about feeling like my time and effort are valued. Babysitting Emily so frequently has started to feel less like helping out and more like an obligation, especially when I'm not getting any recognition for it. But Anna wasn't having it. She ended the conversation by saying she'd figure something else out and hasn't spoken to me much since. Now she's venting to our parents, who think I'm being inconsiderate. They've told me that Anna is under a lot of pressure and that I should just help her out until she gets back on her feet. But the thing is, Anna has been in this situation for years, and I don't see anything changing anytime soon. I feel like if I keep agreeing to babysit for free, it's just going to become an expectation, and I'll never be able to set boundaries. I feel really guilty about the whole situation. I know Anna is struggling, and I don't want to make things harder for her. At the same time, I don't think it's fair to expect me to sacrifice my time and well-being without any acknowledgement. I'm only 17, and I already have so much to deal with. Is it really wrong to ask for compensation when I'm essentially taking on the role of a part-time babysitter? So, am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my niece unless Anna pays me? Or am I justified in setting this boundary? I'm open to advice because I really don't want to cause a rift in my family, but I also feel like my time and effort deserve to be respected. Am I the asshole for refusing to split a $500 raffle winnings with my girlfriend? My girlfriend, 22F, and I, 22M, have been dating for about a year and a half. Recently, we went on vacation with my family, and during the trip, we attended a cornhole tournament with one of my cousins. At the event, there were raffle boards where you could buy squares for $10 each. The prizes varied, and I decided to buy one square on 3 different boards, spending a total of $30. I let my girlfriend choose the spots where she would write my name. To my surprise, I ended up winning the $500 prize on one of the boards. For some context, in our relationship, I cover about 80% of our expenses. This includes dinners, activities, and other shared costs. She handles the remaining 20%, but it's important to note that she typically uses her parents' credit card for her contributions. Her parents are financially well off and help her out since she is a college student. She doesn't use her own money for these expenses. After I collected my winnings, my girlfriend turned to me and said, "So, we're splitting that 50-50, right?" Was caught off guard and replied, No, I don't think so." She didn't take that well and continued asking for a share of the money, suggesting I buy her new shoes, jeans, or even put the money toward a future engagement ring. I declined all her suggestions and instead told her I would use some of the money to cover drinks and food for the night and take her out to dinner another time. It's also worth mentioning that my girlfriend frequently criticizes me whenever I spend money on things like raffle tickets, slots, or sports betting. Her usual response is along the lines of, "You shouldn't be wasting your money on that. You should be saving up for a ring." While I understand her point about saving, it felt hypocritical to me that as soon as I won money, she suddenly wanted half or for me to spend it on her. She doesn't express the same enthusiasm when I lose money, only reinforcing that I shouldn't gamble. I'm conflicted because I feel like I was clear in my reasoning, but she seemed genuinely upset. I'm left wondering, am I the asshole in this situation? Am I the asshole because I got angry at my family for making fun of my boyfriend's hobby? Today was incredibly upsetting for me. I, 22F, had my boyfriend, 23M, over at my house. I still live with my parents and my younger brother, 19M. My boyfriend has a unique and creative hobby. He loves crocheting and is amazing at it. He even has an online store where he sells his work. While it's not his main source of income, it gives him a little extra cash, and he does it simply because he enjoys it. I find his skill and passion inspiring, especially since I'm not very crafty myself. However, it seems my family has a problem with it. We were in the living room watching Netflix while my boyfriend crocheted. He's been busy working on Christmas orders and was trying to catch up. Out of nowhere, my mom walked up to him and asked, "Seriously, you don't have a guy hobby?" Both my boyfriend and I were stunned. Her question was completely unprovoked, and it was such a rude way to phrase it. I immediately responded, telling her that crocheting is art, and art has no gender. She looked at me like I was clueless and said, "But knitting is a girl thing." My dad chimed in, but not to defuse the situation. Instead, he said something like, "Well, everyone can try new things these days, right?" His tone was dripping with sarcasm, and it made me even angrier. My brother found the whole thing hilarious and just laughed at my boyfriend. My boyfriend, while calm on the outside, was clearly hurt by their comments. He left shortly after. I was mortified and furious, so I called my family out on their behavior. I pointed out how rude and disrespectful they had been to my boyfriend, especially since they've seen him crochet before and never seemed to have an issue with it. That's when my dad made it worse by saying he thinks my boyfriend is too effeminate because he has long hair and paints his nails. My brother chimed in, adding that my boyfriend does look kind of gay. Now I'm sitting in my room, fuming. I've already texted my boyfriend to apologize profusely, and he, being the kind person he is, told me not to worry and that it's okay. But it's not okay. I feel humiliated and angry on his behalf. My mom keeps telling me I'm overreacting and being dramatic, claiming they were just looking out for me. But how is belittling my boyfriend and embarrassing him in front of everyone looking out for me? I'm skipping dinner because I can't even stand to be around them right now. Am I overreacting by being this angry, or is my anger justified? I can't shake the feeling that what they did was cruel and uncalled for. Am I the asshole for wanting my husband to apologize even though he had a bad day? I, 34F, have been dealing with a recurring issue with my husband, 42M, and it's really starting to frustrate me. A few times now, when we're settling down to watch a show together at night, he'll start the episode before I'm ready. I'll still be changing, fixing food, or doing something else, and I end up missing the first 10 to 15 minutes. I've told him multiple times that I find it inconsiderate because I never do that to him. The last time it happened, I got upset and told him how I felt. Instead of apologizing, he seemed more annoyed at my reaction and said something like, "You should know I would never intend to hurt your feelings." That made me even more frustrated because it felt dismissive. Yesterday, his dad had surgery. There were some complications with stabilizing his blood pressure. But when I asked my husband if we should go visit, he casually said it wasn't serious and didn't seem too concerned. Later that night, though, he did the TV thing again. I wasn't even remotely ready, still in my work clothes, food in the microwave, no drink prepared. When I noticed, I just stopped what I was doing and stared at him until he realized. I said, "Are you really doing this again?" He tried to stop the show and said, "Sorry," but I was already upset and decided to go to the bedroom to cool down. Later that night, he came into the bedroom. Instead of apologizing, he launched into how he'd had the busiest day at work since starting his job, and how he got scared every time his mom called, thinking she might say his dad had passed away. While I do feel bad for him, I couldn't help but think, 1. That doesn't excuse ignoring something we've discussed repeatedly. 2. He's only bringing up these stresses now, after I got upset, which felt more like deflection than an explanation. I didn't respond because I was still upset, and I felt like the conversation should have started with a genuine apology rather than what felt like an attempt to guilt me into forgetting about it. He got mad that I didn't engage, huffed, stormed out of the room, and hasn't spoken to me since. It's been over 24 hours now. I understand he was stressed about his dad and had a bad workday, but this issue has been ongoing. I also feel like when I bring up something that bothers me, instead of addressing it, he gets defensive and upset that I'm upset. It's like he believes that because he didn't mean to hurt me, I have no right to be hurt. This cycle of defensiveness and lack of meaningful apology is what's really getting to me. So, am I the asshole for wanting an apology despite him having a rough day? Am I the asshole for wanting my husband to apologize even though he had a bad day? I, 34F, have been dealing with a recurring issue with my husband, 42M, and it's really starting to frustrate me. A few times now, when we're settling down to watch a show together at night, he'll start the episode before I'm ready. I'll still be changing, fixing food, or doing something else, and I end up missing the first 10 to 15 minutes. I've told him multiple times that I find it inconsiderate because I never do that to him. The last time it happened, I got upset and told him how I felt. Instead of apologizing, he seemed more annoyed at my reaction and said something like, "You should know I would never intend to hurt your feelings." That made me even more frustrated because it felt dismissive. Yesterday, his dad had surgery. There were some complications with stabilizing his blood pressure. But when I asked my husband if we should go visit, he casually said it wasn't serious and didn't seem too concerned. Later that night, though, he did the TV thing again. I wasn't even remotely ready, still in my work clothes, food in the microwave, no drink prepared. When I noticed, I just stopped what I was doing and stared at him until he realized. I said, "Are you really doing this again?" He tried to stop the show and said, "Sorry," but I was already upset and decided to go to the bedroom to cool down. Later that night, he came into the bedroom. Instead of apologizing, he launched into how he'd had the busiest day at work since starting his job, and how he got scared every time his mom called, thinking she might say his dad had passed away. While I do feel bad for him, I couldn't help but think, that doesn't excuse ignoring something we've discussed repeatedly. He's only bringing up these stresses now, after I got upset, which felt more like deflection than an explanation. I didn't respond because I was still upset, and I felt like the conversation should have started with a genuine apology rather than what felt like an attempt to guilt me into forgetting about it. He got mad that I didn't engage, huffed, stormed out of the room, and hasn't spoken to me since. It's been over 24 hours now. I understand. He was stressed about his dad and had a bad workday, but this issue has been ongoing. I also feel like when I bring up something that bothers me, instead of addressing it, he gets defensive and upset that I'm upset. It's like he believes that because he didn't mean to hurt me, I have no right to be hurt. This cycle of defensiveness and lack of meaningful apology is what's really getting to me. So, am I the asshole for wanting an apology despite him having a rough day? Later that night, he came into the bedroom. Instead of apologizing, he launched into how he'd had the busiest day at work since starting his job, and how he got scared every time his mom called, thinking she might say his dad had passed away. While I do feel bad for him, I couldn't help but think, 1. That doesn't excuse ignoring something we've discussed repeatedly. 2. He's only bringing up these stresses now, after I got upset, which felt more like deflection than an explanation. I didn't respond because I was still upset, and I felt like the conversation should have started with a genuine apology rather than what felt like an attempt to guilt me into forgetting about it. He got mad that I didn't engage, huffed, stormed out of the room, and hasn't spoken to me since. It's been over 24 hours now. I understand he was stressed about his dad and had a bad workday, but this issue has been ongoing. I also feel like when I bring up something that bothers me, instead of addressing it, he gets defensive and upset that I'm upset. It's like he believes that because he didn't mean to hurt me, I have no right to be hurt. This cycle of defensiveness and lack of meaningful apology is what's really getting to me. So, am I the asshole for wanting an apology despite him having a rough day? Am I the asshole for ruining tradition? Every year before Christmas, my extended family gathers at my parents' house. My siblings, cousins, and I are scattered across the East Coast, so it's rare for all of us to be in one place at the same time. During these gatherings, it's a tradition for the grown children, my generation, to go out to a brewery or restaurant for lunch, just us and our spouses. It's a time I cherish because I don't often get to see my siblings and cousins. Over the past few years, however, the nature of this lunch has changed. Friends of friends, spouses' friends, or even people who just happen to be in town get invited or invite themselves. I've never extended invitations myself because, to me, this tradition is about spending time with family. I've voiced my concerns about how these lunches have become less intimate, but my opinions are usually dismissed. Instead, I'm teased for being too uptight and told to invite some friends if I'm unhappy, which completely misses my point. This year, two specific people were invited who I absolutely cannot stand. These people have a history of making snide remarks and getting digs in at me and my wife. They're not just annoying, they're actively unpleasant. While I usually try to brush things off, I've reached the point where I feel I shouldn't have to endure this kind of treatment just to keep the peace. When I found out these two were invited, I said I wouldn't attend. I told my family they could go ahead and enjoy themselves, but my wife and I would make other plans. Now I'm being accused of ruining tradition because I'm opting out. They think I should suck it up for the sake of the group, but I feel like as an adult I shouldn't have to put up with people who treat me poorly. So, am I the asshole for skipping the lunch? Should I have just gone along with it for one more year to avoid upsetting everyone? Am I the asshole for giving the spare key to my sister instead of my girlfriend's parents? My girlfriend and I recently moved into a new apartment together. When it came to deciding who should have the spare key, I gave it to my sister. My reasoning was that she lives closer to us than my girlfriend's parents, who are in another city, and I felt it made more sense for someone nearby to have the key in case of emergencies. However, my girlfriend wasn't happy with my decision. She pointed out that my sister doesn't like her very much, which makes her uncomfortable with my sister having easy access to our apartment. She also brought up a past incident where my sister used the spare key to our previous apartment without asking beforehand. My sister later explained that she had been carsick and needed a place to rest for an hour, and I thought it was a reasonable use of the key. At the time, my girlfriend didn't say anything, so I assumed she was okay with it. However, she's been bringing it up more recently, and it's clear it bothered her. In addition to giving my sister the spare key, I went ahead and made a duplicate for her parents, thinking this would be a compromise. I admit I didn't tell her beforehand about making the duplicate, which upset her even more. I've apologized for not discussing it with her, but I still think having multiple people we trust with a spare key is a good thing. If she prefers, we could even give another spare to a friend. To me, this felt like a win-win situation where everyone gets what they want. That said, my girlfriend is still mad. She says I crossed her boundaries by giving my sister the key, especially after the previous incident, and feels I made the decision unilaterally. She's been giving me the cold shoulder ever since. I think this whole argument is unnecessary, but am I the asshole for how I handled this? Should I have approached it differently? So, am I the asshole for skipping the lunch? Should I have just gone along with it for one more year to avoid upsetting everyone? Would I be the asshole if I refused to give my neighbor money for a portion of his private security company bill? I live in a reasonably nice area within a major city in the United States. Many of my neighbors are quite well off, and as a result, our neighborhood has become a target for criminal activities. Over the past year, we've seen an uptick in issues like vehicle prowling, break-ins, and theft. Several homes on my street have had their garages broken into, and it's become a growing concern for everyone. Like many others in the neighborhood, I decided to invest in a home security system to protect my property. One of my neighbors, who I'll call Dan, decided to take it a step further. Unlike most of us who rely on standard security systems, he hired a private security company to patrol his property. This company uses a marked vehicle to perform regular drive-bys and perimeter checks around his home. Since Dan lives just 2 houses down from me, I see the security guards often. They're friendly, and they usually wave at us when driving through the neighborhood. 3 weeks ago, an incident occurred that brought this security arrangement into focus. While I was not at home, someone tried to break into my garage. Thankfully, my home security system did its job and alerted me immediately. The alarm siren blared loudly, and my floodlights turned on. It just so happened that Dan's private security guard was on his patrol at that exact time. Hearing the alarm, the guard stopped his vehicle and got out to investigate. The would-be thief was leaving my garage at that moment and began running away. The security guard gave chase, but, unfortunately, the robber managed to escape. The guard called the police to report what had happened, although my security system had already done so automatically. He stayed at my house for over an hour, waiting for the police to arrive and giving them a statement about what he saw. I provided the authorities with footage from my security cameras, and the incident was officially documented in a police report. Now comes the issue. Yesterday evening, shortly after I got home from work, I heard a knock at my door. Checking my camera, I saw that it was Dan. For context, I don't know Dan very well. Our interactions have been limited to friendly waves or brief, neighborly chats when walking our dogs. So, it was a little unusual to see him standing at my door. I answered, and he immediately brought up the attempted break-in. We exchanged some polite comments about how scary these situations are and how thankful we are for our respective security systems. Then, Dan shifted the conversation. He told me that he felt I should contribute to his private security company's bill for the month. I was taken aback and asked him why he thought that was necessary. Dan explained that the security guard who interrupted the robbery and stayed to help was only in the neighborhood because Dan had paid for his services. He emphasized that the guard had spent over an hour dealing with the situation, which included calling the police, providing a statement, and ensuring everything was secure until the authorities arrived. Dan asked me for $300, saying it would make things fair since I had benefited from the security patrol that he had personally financed. At this point, I was pretty shocked. I told Dan that while I appreciated the guard's actions, I had never asked for his assistance. The guard had stopped because he heard my alarm and saw my floodlights. He acted on his own judgment. I also pointed out that my security system had already contacted the police before the guard did. Dan didn't back down and reiterated that I should contribute to the cost since the presence of his guard had helped prevent the robbery from escalating. However, he never mentioned how much he pays for the service in total. For all I know, $300 might be the entire monthly cost, and he's trying to offload it onto me. I told Dan that I didn't feel I owed him anything. He seemed irritated and left shortly after. Later, when I discussed this with my girlfriend, she suggested that I should just pay him to avoid creating tension with a neighbor. She argued that keeping the peace might be worth the $300, but I strongly disagree. I feel like this is a ridiculous request, and giving in would set a bad precedent. What's next? He starts asking other neighbors to chip in for his private guard too. I think Dan is just trying to squeeze some extra money out of me, and I don't plan to pay him. However, I can't shake the feeling that this might cause bad blood between us. So, would I be the asshole if I ignore Dan and refuse to pay? Am I the asshole for not getting an Uber for my drunk friend to take her home? I am a 35-year-old man, and I recently became friends with a 45-year-old woman, Jane, name changed. Jane and I hit it off quickly and have become quite close over the past few months. Our relationship is entirely platonic, and I've made it clear on multiple occasions that I am only interested in being friends. I mention this because I believe there's a difference between how you treat a friend and how you treat a romantic partner in certain situations, and this distinction is relevant to the story. Jane and I often hang out together. We've been to events, dinners, drinks, movies, and even gotten drunk together on a few occasions. There have been a couple of instances when she was too tired or intoxicated to go home, so she crashed at my place. I didn't mind this arrangement as long as it was planned in advance, and I was prepared to accommodate her. She lives about 45 minutes away by train, so having her stay over occasionally made sense when the timing or circumstances called for it. Recently, we made plans to attend a daytime party together. The plan was for Jane to come to my place beforehand, leave a change of clothes, and then head to the party with me. After the party, we planned to return to my place, where she could change before heading out to another event she had scheduled for the evening. She wasn't planning to stay overnight, and I hadn't prepared for her to stay either since she had made it clear she intended to leave for her other plans. However, things didn't go as planned. We ended up enjoying ourselves at the party and decided to stay out much later than anticipated. Jane made no indication that she wanted to leave early, so we missed the window for her to attend her evening event. Both of us got quite drunk by the end of the night. As the party wrapped up, I wanted to stay out longer with some friends, but I noticed Jane was heavily intoxicated. I decided to walk her to the train station to make sure she got on a train that would take her straight home. While I thought this was a reasonable and responsible course of action, it didn't go over well with Jane. Shortly after she got on the train, I started receiving frantic calls from her. She accused me of abandoning her while she was drunk and called me a terrible friend. Later, she called again, upset and blaming me for the fact that she had left her house keys at my place earlier in the day. Jane explained that she was now stranded outside her home, waiting for someone to bring her a spare set of keys. She continued to say it was my fault because I hadn't taken her back to my place to stay the night. By the time this all unfolded, my evening was effectively ruined, and I decided to just head home myself. The next day, Jane and I talked about what happened. She apologized for her behavior but still insisted that I had been wrong. She argued that a good friend would have gotten her an Uber rather than making her take the train while she was so drunk. According to her, all her other friends would have taken better care of her in that situation. In my defense, I pointed out that I've seen Jane take the train home after drinking. On other occasions, even when she was intoxicated and needed to be up early the next day. I was also fairly drunk myself that night and didn't think to treat her any differently than I would have treated any of my other friends in the same situation. While I understand her frustration, I don't think I was in the wrong for assuming she could handle getting home on the train, as she had done before. So, am I the asshole for not getting her an Uber or letting her stay over at my place? Am I the asshole for repossessing my car from a friend? I am a 38-year-old man fortunate enough to own several vehicles. While I only actively use 2 or 3 of them, I maintain the rest because I enjoy collecting and maintaining cars. A few months ago, a friend of mine, Jill, 35F, reached out to me asking if I'd be willing to sell her one of my cars. Jill has a reputation for constantly being in predicaments and frequently relying on others to help her out of tight spots. Knowing this, I was certain she didn't have the money or the means to finance a car purchase. Instead of selling her the car outright, I offered to help her out by leasing the car to her. We verbally agreed on a payment of $200 per month, and I let her take possession of the vehicle under the assumption that she would follow through with this arrangement. For context, all of my vehicles are equipped with GPS trackers and remote access features for security purposes. This became relevant later. For the first 2 months, I didn't receive any payments. I contacted Jill to ask for an update, and she explained that she was having trouble finding a job and dealing with issues like apartment hunting. Although I was frustrated, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. To formalize things, I drafted a lease agreement outlining the $200 monthly payment, late fees, and terms for repossession if she failed to pay. Jill signed the agreement, and things seemed to improve briefly. She made a full payment for 1 month, followed by a half payment the next month, and then another full payment. In total, she paid $500. However, after that, she went completely radio silent. When I tried to contact her to find out what was going on, she claimed she needed the car's title in her name to legally drive it, which she said was why she hadn't been able to make payments. I refused to give her the title, as this was a lease agreement, not a purchase. I pointed out that I knew she was lying because the car was GPS tracked, and I could see she had been using it regularly. In fact, she had taken several road trips to places like Chicago, St. Louis, Omaha, and Minnesota, all while supposedly unable to drive it. She became angry but eventually asked if we could renegotiate the lease terms. However, I didn't think renegotiating was fair, especially since she clearly had the money for these trips but wasn't prioritizing the agreed-upon payments. I gave her 60 days to catch up on her payments or I would repossess the car. The 60 days passed without her making any effort to get current, and when I followed up, she asked for another extension. At that point, I decided I'd had enough. I used the GPS tracking to locate the car, repossessed it, and informed Jill that she still owed me $700 for the missed payments. She apologized at the time and left without much fuss. A few months later, Jill contacted me again, saying she had the $700 she owed me and wanted to discuss renegotiating a new lease for the car. I told her I'd be willing to discuss a new lease only after she paid the $700 she owed. However, as soon as I brought up this condition, she bailed on the idea. I later informed Jill that if she didn't pay the $700, I would take her to small claims court and seek $1,100 instead. This amount would cover the unpaid $700, the time she had the car under our verbal agreement before the written lease and court costs. That's when things took a turn for the worse. Jill started blasting me to everyone she knew. She told her family, friends, and even some of our mutual acquaintances that I had screwed her over and left her stranded. People started reaching out to me, angry and accusing me of taking advantage of a woman in need. The mildest criticism I received was that I was heartless for repossessing the car. Some argued that since I had already gotten the car back, Jill didn't owe me anything further. This reaction has left me completely baffled. From my perspective, I was more than generous in trying to help Jill. I provided her with a vehicle when she couldn't afford one, formalized an agreement to protect both of us, and gave her multiple chances to get caught up on payments. Yet now, it feels like I'm the bad guy simply because I enforced the terms of the agreement we both agreed upon. So, am I the asshole here for repossessing my car and insisting Jill pay what she owes me? Or is this just a case of people taking her side because they think she's a victim? Am I the asshole for upsetting my best friend's wife? This September, my best friend and I decided to take a trip together. For context, he is married while I am not. We've been close for years, and this was a much-anticipated getaway to spend some quality time as friends. During the planning phase, I suggested that we stay at an Airbnb instead of a hotel. My reasoning was simple. I wanted the flexibility to entertain female company privately in my own room if the opportunity arose. My best friend agreed without hesitation and never mentioned it being an issue. In all honesty, it never crossed my mind that this could become a problem or that it would create any conflict, especially since I know my friend to be loyal and trustworthy. To add some background, his wife has always struck me as someone who is quite insecure. From my perspective, it seems like she overcompensates through her appearance. She has implants, wears a lot of makeup, and invests heavily in her looks. I should also mention that we are all well into our 40s, so it's not like we're kids figuring things out. My best friend, on the other hand, is the definition of commitment. He takes his marriage vows extremely seriously and is one of the most loyal people I know. When he proposed to his now wife, she already had 3 children from a previous relationship. He went above and beyond for her, even building an addition onto the house he had already purchased on his own to make room for her family. In my view, a man who takes such intentional and decisive actions to support and prioritize his relationship does not give off cheater vibes. There's simply no reason to doubt his integrity. During the trip, my friend and his wife stayed in regular contact. He would call her every day, giving updates about what we were doing and the places we were visiting. I never thought anything of it because I know that's just their dynamic. He's very open with her. However, after the trip, things took a turn. Apparently, at some point during one of their conversations, she asked him outright, "Are you sure there were no girls over at your place?" Now, here's the thing. I did have female company over one night during the trip, as I had planned. However, my friend wasn't involved at all. In fact, he excused himself entirely. When the gathering was over, I sent him a quick text message saying clear to let him know the company had left and that it was fine for him to return to the house. He wasn't even physically present while my guests were there. To me, it seemed like a non-issue. He wasn't involved, and there was no temptation or gray area for him. Fast forward about 2 months. His wife had an opportunity to go through his phone and discovered the text message I had sent that night. She confronted him about it, wanting to know the context behind the message. He explained the situation truthfully, telling her that I am an adult and that he wasn't involved in my personal activities. However, this explanation didn't seem to satisfy her. She became upset with me, claiming that I had put him in a difficult position by having female guests over during the trip. From my perspective, I don't understand what position she's referring to. My best friend wasn't involved in my activities, wasn't present during the gathering, and has never shown any interest in engaging in anything inappropriate. I didn't ask him to lie, cover for me, or participate in any way. He was free to return to the house whenever he wanted, and I even made sure to text him to confirm that my company had left. So where's the harm? Her reaction has left me baffled. It seems to me that this boils down to her insecurity and perhaps her lack of trust in her husband, though, again, I can't see any reason why she wouldn't trust him. He's proven time and again that he's committed to their marriage and puts his family first. I don't feel that I did anything wrong, but her anger and accusations make me question whether I might have crossed a line without realizing it. So, am I the asshole here? Or is his wife overreacting? Am I the asshole for not spending more time with my absent father after meeting him for the first time in 8 years? For some background, I'm a 15-year-old who has had little to no contact with my father for most of my life. My parents divorced when I was very young, just a toddler, and since then, I've been raised by my incredibly loving mother and my grandparents, who have been my rock. They're the ones I've always considered my real family, and I adore them deeply. My father, on the other hand, has been almost completely absent. The few memories I have of him are vague, distant, and certainly not warm or meaningful. I've maybe spoken to him once or twice as a child, but that's about it. Out of the blue, my father emailed my mother recently to inform her that he would be flying to the city where we live. He mentioned that he had some work-related obligations here. He's a college professor and apparently somewhat prominent in his field, so he was attending educational conferences or something like that. As part of this trip, he also requested to meet me, and by extension, my mom. When I first heard about this, my reaction was mixed. Honestly, I felt a bit surprised but also annoyed. Here was this man, someone who had chosen to be absent from my life for over a decade, suddenly deciding to pop back in and ask to see me. It felt intrusive and awkward, to say the least. On top of that, I have this unexplainable discomfort around adult men. It's not something I talk about openly, but being around men who aren't family or service workers makes me uneasy. And while he may technically be my father, I don't see him as family at all. Despite my hesitation, I felt obligated to meet him. After all, he'd flown all this way, and it seemed impolite to flat out refuse. I didn't want to cause a scene or make my mom feel uncomfortable either, so I reluctantly agreed. When the day came, my mom and I picked him up at the university where he was attending his event. The plan was to take him to a shopping center because he had expressed interest in buying me a Christmas present. From the moment he got in the car, I felt a strange sense of disgust. Wasn't anything he said or did. It was just this overwhelming feeling of discomfort. To distract myself from the awkwardness, I played music in the car and avoided making conversation. I didn't say much, if anything, the entire ride. At the shopping center, my mom had mentioned that I wanted a pair of high-quality headphones for Christmas. They were something I'd been eyeing for a while but hadn't expected to get because they were quite expensive. To my surprise, he offered to buy them for me. Not only that, but he also got a few books for me that I'd picked out. In total, he spent around $1,000 on these gifts. I thanked him because it was the polite thing to do, but I still didn't know how to feel about it. While the gesture was generous, it didn't change the fact that he's been absent for my entire life. Compared to the love, effort, and sacrifices my mom and grandparents have made for me over the years, his money felt insignificant. Things got even more awkward when he asked the bookstore manager to take a photo of the three of us together. He wanted me to stand in the middle, but I felt too weird about it and stood next to my mom instead. Then, he asked if we could take a photo together, just the two of us. I declined. At the time, it just didn't feel right. I didn't want to pretend we had a close relationship when we clearly didn't. Looking back, though, I wonder if I should have been more accommodating. It wouldn't have hurt to take the photo, and maybe it would have made him feel better. Afterward, we dropped him off at his next destination. The entire encounter felt rushed and transactional. Pick him up, let him buy me stuff, drop him off. I barely spoke to him the entire time. Now that the day is over, and he's likely on a flight back to wherever he lives, I feel conflicted. I don't see him as a real part of my life, and I doubt I'll see him again for several more years, but I can't shake this sense of guilt. I keep thinking I should have at least tried to talk to him more, to make him feel less unwelcome. He made an effort to reconnect in his own way, and I treated the entire experience like a chore. At the same time, it's hard to ignore the resentment I feel. He's missed so many birthdays, milestones, and ordinary moments that make up a relationship. My mom and grandparents have been there for all of it, while he has been little more than a stranger. So yes, he spent a lot of money on me in one day, but does that really make up for a lifetime of absence? Now I'm left wondering, am I a bad person for how I acted? Should I have been more gracious and tried to build some sort of connection, even if it felt forced? Or was I justified in keeping my guard up after everything? Am I the asshole for disrespecting my family? I am a 16-year-old girl, and this year, my family planned a sweet 16 party for me. The main organizer was my Aunt May, who lives all the way in Florida. I want to start by saying I genuinely appreciate the effort and time she put into making my party special. However, the entire planning process leading up to the event was riddled with conflicts that left me feeling frustrated, hurt, and even questioning my own actions. The issues began about 3 weeks before the party when my mom, my aunts, and I all gathered at my Aunt Jess's house to finalize the plans. This included choosing my walk-in song and practicing dances for the big day. For my entrance, I had chosen 7 Rings by Ariana Grande, the clean version, of course. I felt the song was empowering and represented the confidence and joy I wanted to express on such a big occasion. However, when I played it for them, they immediately shut it down. My mom and aunts made it very clear that they did not approve of my choice. They said things like, "This song isn't appropriate for you," and "It's just not who you are." Then, to my utter shock, they started suggesting alternatives that were completely out of touch with what a 16-year-old girl might enjoy. They wanted me to use old-fashioned, childish Christian songs instead. Songs I hadn't even heard since I was a little kid in Sunday school. I felt humiliated that they thought these songs were better choices. It felt like they weren't taking me or my preferences seriously at all. Trying to hold back tears, I excused myself to the bathroom. I cried quietly, feeling defeated. But luckily one of my closest friends who had come along for support noticed something was wrong and followed me. She hugged me and told me to stand my ground, reminding me that this party was supposed to be about me, not anyone else. Her words helped me calm down a little, and I decided to return to the discussion, prepared to compromise if needed. When I came back, I suggested another song that I thought might be more acceptable to them, something less flashy and more neutral. But to my disappointment, they shut that one down too. At that point, I felt like no matter what I picked, it wouldn't meet their impossible standards. They then moved on to planning a performance for the party, which they had been very excited about. My Aunt May suggested I do a lip-syncing act, which I thought could be a fun group activity, like a dance number or something lighthearted. But no, what they had in mind was far from what I expected. They wanted me to perform A Whole New World from Aladdin, a duet with my older male cousin. Both my cousin and I were incredibly uncomfortable with this idea. For one, it felt overly formal and cringy, especially since it was just a random karaoke performance. Second, singing a love duet with a family member was just plain awkward. Despite expressing my discomfort, my family dismissed my concerns. They kept insisting that the performance would have deep meaning and be a beautiful moment for the party. When I politely but firmly tried to refuse, my Aunt May got visibly upset. She walked out of the room, followed by my mom and Aunt Jess, leaving me sitting there, confused and in tears. I kept asking myself what I had done wrong to upset them so much. My friends comforted me again, assuring me I wasn't being unreasonable. However, I couldn't shake the guilt, so I ended up apologizing to my Aunt May later, even though deep down, I didn't feel I had anything to apologize for. Looking back, I now regret that apology. After this, my mom sat me down and lectured me about how my behavior wasn't reflecting my values. She brought up my baptism and told me I needed to act in a way that honored those beliefs. It felt like she was weaponizing my faith to make me feel guilty for wanting things to be my way on my own birthday. Trying to find a middle ground, I searched for a Christian rap song I thought they might find acceptable. It was upbeat and modern but still aligned with their values. I sent it to them hoping it would work, but they rejected it too, this time because the artist was male. Their reasoning made no sense to me, but I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. I finally told them I would just use the song Aunt May had picked for me. Unfortunately, when I sent that message, my mom misinterpreted my tone and accused me of having an attitude. She sent me a harsh text saying, "I don't know what's wrong with you, but when my daughter comes back, let me know." That text completely broke me. I felt like she didn't see me as her daughter anymore, just some problem to fix. I ended up venting and crying to my cousins, who thankfully supported me through it all. Later, I called my dad, who had been the only person in my family not involved in the drama, for some comfort. He listened and told me to just focus on enjoying my day no matter what. On the day of the party, I went along with everything they had planned. I walked in to the song Aunt May chose, and I performed the lip-sync duet with my cousin, even though we both felt awkward. The party itself was okay. I got to see my friends and family, laugh, and open gifts, but I barely had time to take photos or truly savor the experience because I was still reeling from all the emotional stress. Even though the song wasn't terrible, it now carries bad memories for me because of how everything unfolded. I do love my family, but this experience highlighted how toxic and emotionally draining they can be. I can't help but wonder if I was being a spoiled brat for wanting things my way, or if I was justified in standing up for myself and my preferences. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for going off on an overbearing father? I am a 25-year-old woman working at a private school, where I teach a small class of young children. My students range in age from 3 to 5 years old, and while I love my job, there are occasional challenges, most of which come from dealing with difficult parents rather than the children themselves. One such parent has been particularly overbearing and demanding since the beginning, and yesterday, the situation finally boiled over. Let me explain what happened. At the end of each trimester, we distribute the children's report cards to their parents. This process is done in person, directly after the class ends, to ensure that all parents receive the reports and have a chance to ask questions if needed. The process is usually smooth, but this time, it didn't go as planned for one specific parent. After class, I stayed back to hand out the report cards to each parent as they came to collect their child. All went well except for one parent, the father of a little girl in my class. He had left with his daughter before I could hand him the report card, despite the fact that all parents had been explicitly instructed to wait for a few moments so I could distribute the folders. Since he didn't wait, I set his daughter's folder aside and let my boss know. She assured me that she would handle it by contacting him later. Now, this wasn't the first time we've had issues with this particular father. He has a history of making unreasonable demands and causing unnecessary stress for the staff. For example, earlier this year, he was furious because his daughter's class had a rotating series of substitute teachers. We explained to him that her original teacher had been diagnosed with a serious illness, and we were doing our best to ensure the children's learning was uninterrupted by finding available substitutes each week. However, he refused to understand, calling the situation unacceptable and berating us for something completely out of our control. Another time, when he first enrolled his daughter, he demanded a discount on tuition fees because he himself had been a student at the school years ago. He claimed that this entitled him to some kind of alumni privilege. My boss politely but firmly declined his request, which only made him angrier. So, dealing with him has always been a challenge. This morning, he came into the school to collect the report card he missed yesterday. From the moment he arrived, he was visibly irritated. He stormed into the office and began berating my boss for what he called unprofessionalism. He claimed it was outrageous that every other parent had received their child's report card the previous day, while he was the only one left out. We calmly explained the situation, reiterating that we had asked all parents to wait briefly after class so the reports could be distributed. Since he didn't wait, there wasn't much we could do. Furthermore, we reminded him that the reports had also been sent digitally to all families as a backup, so he hadn't actually missed any crucial information. Collecting the physical folder was more of a formality. But he wasn't hearing any of it. He continued to raise his voice, complaining that the school was unprofessional and making thinly veiled threats about pulling his daughter out and enrolling her elsewhere. It was clear he wasn't just upset about the report card, but was looking for any excuse to air his grievances about the school. His attitude was becoming unbearable, and I could see the situation escalating. At that point, I had reached my limit. I tried to stay as respectful as possible, but I also felt the need to set some boundaries. I told him, "Look, it's your choice if you want to move your daughter to another school, but this behavior is unacceptable. You need to calm down. You've been waiting for any small mistake from us just so you can complain, and frankly, it's becoming immature. Your daughter is happy here, and that's what matters most. But at the end of the day, the decision is yours. He didn't say another word. He just grabbed the report card and left, clearly still fuming. After he was gone, my boss came over to talk to me. She told me she understood why I reacted the way I did and that she agreed he had been unreasonable. However, she also said that I should have chosen my words more carefully and been more respectful, even in the face of his rudeness. Now I'm conflicted. On one hand, I feel justified in standing up for myself and my coworkers. This father has been a consistent source of stress for everyone, and his outbursts are draining. On the other hand, I wonder if I could have handled the situation better by staying completely calm and professional, regardless of how he acted. So, am I the asshole for going off on him, or was I right to call out his behavior? Am I the asshole for asking my mom to keep our family and my stepfather's family's traditions separate? Some context. I'm a 16-year-old guy, and my parents recently went through a divorce. To be honest, I don't have great feelings toward either of them right now, but I can acknowledge that their separation was necessary. They weren't at their best together, and it was clear things needed to change. During the divorce, I did my best to support my mom. My dad, 45M, was going through serious mental health struggles, which made him unpredictable and volatile. Conversations with him often ended in him yelling, crying, or spouting nonsense, so I felt like I couldn't reach him emotionally. Meanwhile, my mom, 39F, was really struggling. She was battling depression because of my dad's harassment, and she didn't seem to have anyone to lean on. So, I put my own feelings on hold to be there for her, even though I was dealing with my own depression at the time. Throughout the divorce, my mom made some heartfelt promises to me, which gave me hope for our future. She said she wouldn't get rid of my cat after the divorce. She wouldn't rush into a relationship or move a new guy into the house right away. She'd find a way to show me how much she appreciated my support once things settled down. I really believed in her. She seemed like she was trying so hard to fight for us, and I wanted to show her that I cared. I even felt proud to be there for her. She became my anchor during a time when I couldn't even rely on my faith in God. I put all my faith in her instead. I can't stress this enough. She was my safe space, and I truly believed we could rebuild our lives and be happy again. Recently, now it's December, and the divorce was finalized back in May. Things have drastically changed since then, and not in the way I hoped. In October, we moved to a new town. Shortly after, my mom moved her boyfriend into our home. They've been together for only 5 months, and he brought his 2 sons, 13M and 10M, with him. While his kids are cool and I get along with them, this whole situation has made me feel like my relationship with my mom is more strained than ever. Feels like she's completely changed. For starters, she keeps trying to find reasons to get rid of my cat, despite her promise to keep him. She claims it's because he poops on the floor, but that's only because my 13-year-old sister never cleans the litter box properly. The real reason, I think, is that she just doesn't like the cat anymore. Every time I try to talk to her about anything serious, my sister jumps in with her opinion, and my mom lets it derail the conversation. It's impossible to talk to her one-on-one because she's always either busy drinking with her boyfriend or just emotionally unavailable. When I do manage to talk to her, it often feels like she dismisses my feelings entirely. If I disagree with her, she either bursts into tears or accuses me of having an attitude. It doesn't matter how calm or respectful I try to be. There's no winning. My sister constantly stirs the pot and makes things worse, and my mom is too caught up in her own frustrations with me to notice. It's gotten to the point where I feel like I'm just a burden in her house. She keeps calling everything hers. Her table, her forks, her sink. It might sound silly, but it makes me feel like I don't belong here, like I'm just some guest she has to tolerate. The actual story. Today, on the drive home from school, my mom brought up a Christmas tradition we've had for years. Matching pajamas for me and my sister. She seemed excited about continuing it, which made me hopeful that we might have a chance to bond over something familiar this holiday season. But then, she mentioned wanting to include her boyfriend's kids in the tradition so they wouldn't feel left out. That's when my excitement deflated. I don't have anything against her boyfriend's kids, they're great. But this tradition is something that feels uniquely ours. It's one of the few things that reminds me of the happier times before the divorce, and I'm not ready to share it. This house still doesn't feel like home to me, and blending our families feels rushed and forced. At dinner, I decided to bring it up respectfully. I calmly told my mom I wasn't comfortable with sharing this tradition yet. I explained that while I understand the importance of making her boyfriend's family feel welcome, I think it's also important to preserve some traditions that are just for our family. I suggested that we could find a balance between everyone family time and time for just us. Instead of listening, my mom and sister started giggling and called me Brenda, a reference to my slightly narcissistic grandmother. They said I was being selfish and rude for even bringing it up. I felt humiliated. I stopped engaging in the conversation, finished my food, and went to my room. Now my mom and sister are out shopping at Walmart while her boyfriend is unpacking more of his things in our house. So what do you think? Am I wrong for wanting to keep this tradition separate for now? Am I being selfish for feeling like our families don't need to merge into one big happy unit right away? Or was I out of line for even bringing it up? Am I the asshole for disinviting my sister-in-law to Christmas and refusing to invite her back, causing unnecessary drama? I'm a 26-year-old woman, and I've been dating my boyfriend, Alex, 28M, for 3 years. Alex has a sister, Sally, 26F, who I'll refer to as my sister-in-law, SIL, to keep things simple, even though Alex and I aren't married yet. Recently, Alex and I moved in together, and we decided to host Christmas at our new place as a housewarming celebration. We invited both of our families. Alex's parents, Sally, my parents, my brother's wife, and my 2 nieces. Sally's best friend, Mary, was also invited since her family lives far away. Mary and I have hung out a few times and get along well. Everything seemed set for a nice holiday, but things took a turn when Sally and I had a stupid argument. For some context, both Sally and I have tattoos and piercings, and we share a love of metal and rock music. I used to dress quite goth and had numerous facial and ear piercings, but over the past couple of years, I've toned down my style. I no longer wear my stretched gauges, and I've taken out most of my piercings. Recently, however, I decided to put my nose ring back in. A small thing that made a big difference to my self-esteem as I've been recovering from severe depression. The ring I chose is a single piercing that looks like a double ring, and I loved how it suited me. Sally, on the other hand, still leans into the goth aesthetic and has multiple piercings, including 2 proper nose rings in one nostril. When we met up recently, she noticed my piercing and immediately got weirdly mean about it. She asked, "Did you get a new one?" And when I said no, she made this sarcastic, almost mocking comment. "Why the fuck are you wearing a fake double nose ring? Being a fucking poser?" I actually, she emphasized the word, went and got it done properly. She didn't stop there. She went on to say it didn't suit me and that I'd be better off going back to being a pretend happy person. It felt like a dig at my mental health struggles, and the whole thing came out of nowhere. She's made snide remarks about me before, joking that I don't fit into the metal group because I wear colorful clothes now, but this was much more hurtful and targeted. When I went home, I told Alex what happened. He was understandably upset and called Sally to confront her. Instead of apologizing, she tried to brush it off as a joke, claiming I was too weak to handle sarcasm. She kept laughing about it during the call and refused to take any accountability for how hurtful her words were. After that, I decided I no longer wanted her at our Christmas celebration. If she was going to humiliate me in my own home, I didn't see the point of inviting her. Alex agreed and texted Sally, letting her know she was no longer welcome if this was how she was going to behave. That's when the real drama started. Sally threw a massive tantrum, accusing us of targeting and excluding her. She has yet to apologize for her comments, and instead of acknowledging her behavior, she's been playing the victim. When Alex and I explained the situation to his parents, they sided with Sally, saying I was probably being too sensitive and should be the bigger person. They argued that Christmas is a time for family and that I'm causing unnecessary drama by disinviting her. My family, on the other hand, has been very supportive. They pointed out something Alex's parents overlooked: Sally's comment about my mental health. I've only recently started feeling better after a long struggle with depression, and putting my nose ring back in was a small but significant step in rebuilding my confidence. For her to mock that, especially knowing what I've been through, was cruel. My family believes I'm well within my rights to protect my peace and avoid inviting someone who has shown no remorse for their hurtful behavior. I'm starting to second-guess myself, though. I've always been sensitive, especially since battling depression, and I worry that I might be overreacting. Am I wrong for standing my ground and refusing to invite Sally back to Christmas? Should I have just let it slide for the sake of keeping the peace? Edit 1. Thank you for the replies so far. To clarify, I'm not married, but it's easier to refer to Sally as my sister-in-law and Alex's parents as in-laws rather than repeatedly saying my boyfriend's sister or my boyfriend's parents. I thought this would be obvious, but just wanted to clear up any confusion. Edit 2. I've been doing better with my depression in the past few months, but I'm still working on building my self-esteem. The nose ring was a small but empowering choice for me, which is why her comments stung so much. While I try not to let things get to me, Sally's refusal to apologize or take responsibility has made it harder to move past this. Am I the asshole for not allowing my dad to stay at my house while I'm abroad, even if he pays rent? I, 23F, have just finished university in a small town where I've been living in a rented house for the past few years. My dad, 64M, has been a significant financial support for me and my older sister, 26F, throughout our lives. He's always made it clear that he would provide for us as much as needed, and even now, he still pays for most of my sister's expenses. I'm incredibly grateful for his financial support, as it has allowed me to focus on school and other opportunities. I'm about to go abroad for a 2-month internship, which is partially subsidized by a scholarship and partially funded by my dad. This is an exciting opportunity for me, but it's come with a dilemma. My dad has asked to stay in my house while I'm away, and I don't feel comfortable letting him. To explain, my dad has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizoid personality disorder but has refused treatment his entire life. Because of this, he can be very difficult to deal with. He's often aggressive, unreasonable, and unpredictable. He has been both verbally and physically abusive on numerous occasions, and while I try to maintain a relationship with him, it's not easy. He used to own a beach house, but due to some family conflict, his brother now has control over it. Because of that, he wants to stay at my house for about a month while I'm gone. He says he'll pay rent for that time, though he already covers my rent as it is. On the surface, it might seem fair, but the situation is far more complicated. The house I rent is old and has a lot of issues, including significant hydro and structural problems. For example, one of the sinks can't be used because it causes flooding. Despite my repeatedly explaining this to him during his previous visits, he's been here 3 times. He ignores me and uses it anyway, creating a mess that I'm left to deal with. He doesn't listen to my requests about how to care for the house and generally disregards my boundaries. My dad's behavior is another major concern. He's a peculiar man whose actions and comments often make people uncomfortable. He has a habit of acting inappropriately in public, saying odd things, and drawing attention to himself in ways that embarrass me. If he stayed at my house, I know he would take daily walks to my university campus, interacting with people there in his unsettling way and ensuring everyone knows he's my dad. That thought terrifies me. These are people I know, classmates, professors, and potential colleagues, and I'll be returning to campus after my internship for more work and opportunities. His presence could damage my reputation and relationships in an environment that's crucial for my future. While I understand that my dad technically pays for the rent here and could argue it's his house, I still feel like I should have a say in who stays here, especially when his behavior has the potential to negatively impact my life. Unfortunately, saying no to my dad is not without consequences. When he doesn't get his way, he gets furious. He has a pattern of cutting off financial support for a while as punishment and saying extremely hurtful things. I'm afraid that refusing him will lead to him lashing out at me, which is always emotionally draining. At the same time, if I let him stay, I risk him alienating people on campus and creating a mess in the house that I'll have to clean up when I return. It feels like a lose-lose situation, and I don't know what to do. So, am I the asshole for not allowing my dad to stay at my house while I'm abroad, even if he offers to pay rent? Am I the asshole for refusing to accept my mom's new partner? Hi Reddit, I'm a 24-year-old woman, and I'm struggling with a situation involving my mom and her decision to start dating again after my dad's passing. I've tried my best to navigate it, but I'm at a breaking point and questioning if I'm in the wrong. Backstory. Growing up, I was always closer to my dad, while my two brothers were closer to my mom. From a very young age, I got the sense that my mom never really liked me. Over time, I've come to understand that she resented me, and even went so far as to have me for what seemed like manipulative reasons. My mom was a single mother to my eldest brother when she met my dad, an older and wealthier man. I now believe she had me to secure him into a long-term relationship. It's only in the last few years, through conversations with my friends, my partner, and my therapist, that I've begun to realize just how abusive she has been toward me. Her emotional abuse has always been there in subtle and overt ways, and it's shaped a lot of who I am today. Last year, on my birthday, my dad passed away. Losing him was devastating. He wasn't just my father, he was my best friend. But I also told my best friend at the time that I knew I'd effectively lost both parents that day. With my dad gone, I hold no value or purpose in my mom's eyes. She has even told me outright since then that she hates me. Despite this, I moved back into the family home after my dad's passing to help support her emotionally, as I'd promised him I would. I wanted to honor his memory and be there for her in her time of need. However, living with her has been extremely difficult. The emotional abuse has escalated tenfold since my dad died, and it's taking a significant toll on my mental health. The current situation, around 8 months after my dad passed away, my mom began looking for a new partner. She justified it by saying, "When someone gets a divorce, they're allowed to move on, so why am I not?" I've tried my best to be supportive of whatever will make her happy, with the promise I made to my dad always in the back of my mind. I've even given her advice on her dating life when she's asked for it. However, my brothers feel differently. They've been more outspoken, telling her that it's too soon to start dating. She didn't take their opinions well and became angry with them. I agree with them, it does feel too soon, but I've kept my feelings to myself to avoid provoking her. Now, she started bringing men back to the house. She gives me a heads up so I can leave, which I appreciate because the thought of someone else sitting in my dad's chair so soon after his death makes me incredibly uncomfortable. I want her to be happy, but there's something preventing me from fully supporting her decision or even meeting the men she's dating. Why I'm struggling? I think part of it is the fear that, once she finds a new partner, I'll be completely obsolete in her life. I already feel like I've lost both parents, and this would solidify that. Another part of it is that I know her intentions aren't about finding love. She's been very open about wanting a man with a good job who can provide her with the lifestyle my dad did, essentially a sugar daddy dynamic. It doesn't sit well with me. I'm also conflicted because I hate the idea that I might be breaking the promise I made to my dad. I promised to support her, but I just can't bring myself to accept this. I don't know if I'm being unreasonable, selfish, or overly emotional about the situation. Am I the asshole for not fully supporting her decision to move on and refusing to accept the idea of her new partner? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my dad help an elderly woman? Hi, everyone. I originally posted this on an alternate account, but it seems like it got shadow banned, so I'm reposting here. I genuinely need some advice, and I hope I don't get doxxed for sharing this situation. It's been a really tough week, and I'm struggling with how to handle this without completely damaging my relationship with my dad. A bit of backstory. My dad suffered a traumatic brain injury, TBI, a few years ago in a car accident. While he's still able to function relatively well, the injury has impacted his short-term memory significantly. He forgets names easily, constantly loses his keys and cards, and sometimes struggles to follow conversations or remember details. On top of that, he has a tendency to be very trusting, some might even say gullible, which has caused issues in the past. Unfortunately, his drinking habits don't help the situation either, and despite my best efforts to get him help, it's been an uphill battle. Here's what happened. My dad went to the laundromat earlier this week and started chatting with an elderly woman, probably in her mid to late 70s. From what he told me, She mentioned that she's currently living in a motorhome and needs to find a new place to park it. She also shared that she's looking for a job. My dad, being the kind-hearted person he is, offered to help her out by putting in a good word for her at his workplace. I thought that was fine. Helping someone find a job is generous but doesn't cross any boundaries. However, things didn't stop there. My dad came home later and casually announced that he had also offered to let her park her motorhome and live in it in our driveway. She agreed and said she'd pay $300 a month for the space. I was immediately taken aback. For context, we rent our home. This isn't our property to make decisions like this. Plus, $300 a month might sound appealing, but the risks far outweigh the benefits in my eyes. I tried to explain this to my dad, but he's adamant that this is the right thing to do and that I'm overreacting. He insists he's just trying to help someone in need, but I'm not sure he's thought this through at all. I told him point blank, "Dad, this isn't just about being kind. What you're suggesting could get us evicted. We don't own this house. Our landlord would absolutely freak out if they found out someone was living in a motorhome in our driveway. Even if we didn't get evicted immediately, there are so many potential problems. What if this woman gets hurt on our property? What if her insurance or she herself sues us? Or worse, sues the landlord? What if she starts expecting access to the house? What if she turns out to be someone we can't trust? And what if we can't get her to leave if things go south?" I reminded him of past situations where he's tried to help people, only to be taken advantage of. There have been multiple instances where his generosity backfired, and I had to help him pick up the pieces. I told him that while I understand his good intentions, we need to think practically about the consequences. His response? He's furious with me. He called me selfish, said I was being heartless, and accused me of thinking the worst of people. He kept insisting that she's just an old lady and wouldn't do anything to hurt us. But in my mind, age doesn't determine someone's character or reliability. I'm just trying to protect us from a situation that could spiral out of control. What makes this even more frustrating is that we don't even need the extra money. I recently had a great job interview and I'm confident I'll get the position, or if not, I have other applications out that look promising. I'm optimistic about our financial situation improving soon, so the $300 a month isn't worth the potential risks. But my dad can't seem to see past the immediate helping someone in need aspect. Now we're at a standstill. He's upset with me, and I'm frustrated that he doesn't see where I'm coming from. I feel like I'm being forced into the role of the bad guy just for trying to look out for us. At the same time, I'm second-guessing myself. Am I being too cynical or paranoid? Should I have handled the conversation differently? I hate fighting with my dad, especially given everything he's been through with his TBI, but I also feel like I need to stand my ground on this. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let this happen? Is there a better way to approach this that I'm not seeing? I'd appreciate any advice or perspective. Thank you for reading. Am I the asshole for refusing to follow my father's religious expectations? Hi everyone. I'm a 20-year-old woman currently grappling with a complicated and emotionally charged situation involving my father, and honestly, I feel like I'm at a breaking point. For some context, I come from a traditional Muslim family, and while I have great respect for my cultural and religious heritage, I find myself struggling with my father's specific interpretation of our faith and its role in my life. I've always been passionate about learning and exploring new opportunities. I'm currently in graduate school, pursuing a degree in environmental science. This field isn't just a job for me, it's my calling. My focus is on climate change research, a career that involves a lot of collaboration with international teams and sometimes requires extended travel. I truly believe that my work contributes to the greater good, as climate change is a critical issue affecting communities worldwide. When I first shared my career aspirations with my family, my father appeared to support me on the surface. He didn't outright object, and at times he even seemed proud of my academic achievements. However, I often noticed subtle signs of disappointment or hesitation in his demeanor. Over time, these feelings have become more explicit. Lately, he has been pressuring me to settle down, which, in his view, means finding a husband, starting a family, and putting my career ambitions aside. This has led to frequent arguments and a growing emotional distance between us. The breaking point came last week. I received an incredible offer for a 2-year research fellowship that would require me to move abroad. It's a dream opportunity, one that could have a significant impact on my career and the communities I hope to serve. When I shared the news with my father, I expected at least some acknowledgement of my hard work. Instead, he was furious. He accused me of neglecting my real responsibilities to our family and claimed that pursuing this fellowship would bring shame and dishonor to our family name. He framed his argument around traditional gender roles, insisting that a woman's primary duty is to support her husband and raise children. He argued that my focus on career advancement was selfish and contrary to our cultural values. I tried to explain that my work addresses critical global challenges and is, in its own way, a form of community service and moral responsibility, but he refused to listen and shut down the conversation entirely. I'll admit I lost my cool. I was hurt and frustrated, and instead of keeping a level head, I lashed out. I told him that his mindset was stuck in the past, and that his views were backwards and primitive. I went even further by bringing up sensitive family history, specifically, how my uncle's ultra-traditional parenting had limited his children's opportunities, leaving them resentful and unfulfilled. I knew this was a sore subject, but in the heat of the moment, I used it as ammunition. While I stand by my decision to accept the fellowship, I regret how I handled the conversation. My words were harsh, and I can see how they might have been hurtful, even if I believed in what I was saying. My mom, who is usually my biggest ally, is now caught in the middle. She understands my perspective but is deeply hurt by how I spoke to my father. Other family members, like my aunts and uncles, have also weighed in, criticizing me for being disrespectful and saying I should have approached the situation with more tact and grace. On one hand, I feel justified in standing up for myself and my career. On the other hand, I worry that my aggressive approach may have done more harm than good, both in terms of my relationship with my father and the broader family dynamics. I'm starting to question if there was a better way to handle this, and whether I owe my father an apology, not for my decision, but for the way I communicated it. So, am I the asshole for prioritizing my career over my father's expectations and for the way I handled our argument? Could I have managed the situation differently while still standing my ground? I'm open to any advice or insights, as this has been weighing heavily on me. Thanks for taking the time to read my story. Am I the asshole for not unblocking my mother even though she has leukemia? Hi, everyone. I'm feeling really conflicted right now and could use some outside perspectives. To be honest, this situation has been building up for years, but things have come to a head recently, and I don't know if I'm making the right choice or just being heartless. For some background, my relationship with my mom has always been complicated. She hasn't been the kindest person to me throughout my life. That said, she did step up when I was in a really dark place. A few years ago, I was in a domestic violence relationship, and my daughter was still a baby. At that time, my mom was the only family member who actively helped me. Because of that, I've always felt like I owe her, which has made it difficult for me to stand up to her or set boundaries, even when she treats me poorly. Lately, my mom hasn't been feeling well. She's been losing weight and generally looking unwell for some time now, but she refused to go to the doctor until recently. Initially, the doctors thought it might be breast cancer and, understandably, she's been upset about the possibility. However, she's also been taking a lot of her frustration and anxiety out on me, which has been emotionally exhausting. The tipping point happened last Friday. She sent me a message asking if I could bring her sewing machine and a few other items to her house. I was busy helping a friend pack for a move that day, so I told her I couldn't do it immediately but could drop everything off on Sunday instead. That's when everything spiraled. For reasons I still don't fully understand, she got incredibly upset. She started sending me angry messages, accusing me of never helping her. This felt unfair because every time she's had issues, whether it was fights with her ex-husband, disagreements with my brother, who she currently lives with, or needing a place to stay, I've always been the one she called. I've supported her countless times and opened my home to her when she needed it, though I couldn't let her stay permanently because we don't have the space. When she accused me of neglecting her, I pointed out that both my brother and I had messaged her earlier that week, on Tuesday after her doctor's appointment to check on her, and I'd even followed up with her on Wednesday. But she dismissed all of this, told me to fuck off, and went on a tirade about how I'm a selfish cow. She then blocked me on Messenger, adding that I shouldn't bother with her anymore and that when she dies, I'll inherit nothing from her. At that point, I was done. I sent her a long message via text, laying out how I felt about years of verbal and emotional abuse. Afterward, I blocked her in return. Since then, she's been bad-mouthing me to my brother, calling me all sorts of nasty things. But then yesterday, I got a message from my stepdad, her soon-to-be ex-husband. He told me that she's been officially diagnosed with leukemia. You'd think this news would make me feel something. Shock, sadness, even guilt. But honestly, I just feel empty. It's like I've been drained of the capacity to care after years of dealing with her toxicity. I know this probably makes me sound cold, but I've hit a point where I can't keep subjecting myself to the same cycle of abuse, even in light of her illness. The only thing I truly feel concerned about is how this will affect my daughter. She loves her Nana, and I'm worried about how she'll process not seeing her anymore. My mom's diagnosis has everyone around me implying that I should reach out, forgive her, and be there for her. But I can't help thinking about how, even before the leukemia, she would lash out at me whenever things didn't go her way. She's treated me like an emotional punching bag for years. If I unblock her and try to reconnect, I'm scared I'll just end up back in that same toxic cycle. I'm torn between protecting my own mental health and doing what society might consider the right thing to do. Is it wrong to prioritize my own well-being over reaching out to her now that she's sick? Does the fact that she's terminally ill change everything? So, am I the asshole for not unblocking my mom, even though she has leukemia? If anyone needs more context or clarification, I'm happy to provide it. I also have screenshots of the conversation where she blocked me, in case anyone needs proof. Would I be the asshole for not telling my boyfriend that I already know his dad passed away? Hi, everyone. First-time poster here. I've been feeling really conflicted about a situation with my boyfriend, and I need some perspective. For the sake of privacy, I'll be using fake names throughout. So, I, 17F, have been dating my boyfriend, Will, 17M, for about 3 months now. We've known of each other for years. We've been in the same school since we were 11. But we didn't really start talking until late August when we realized we were taking some of the same A-level classes. We hit it off and officially started dating in early September. Here's where things get a bit complicated. It turns out that our parents knew each other when we were younger because Will's family runs a business in the same field as my dad's. They used to collaborate on projects, and apparently both Will and I were involved in promoting those businesses as kids, like helping out at events or making appearances in promotional materials. I'm keeping the details vague because it would be easy to identify us if I went into specifics. When I mentioned to my dad that I was dating Will, he started reminiscing about their past connections. That's when he casually brought up Will's dad, John, and mentioned that he passed away 2 years ago. My dad even attended the wake after the funeral, but Will wasn't there because he stayed home to take care of his younger sister. My dad was really emotional about it, saying what a tragedy it was and how much he respected John. But here's the thing. Will hasn't told me that his dad passed away. I only know because of what my dad told me, and my dad assumed Will had already shared this with me. When I told him that wasn't the case, he became annoyed, saying it was obvious that Will didn't trust me, and that he should have told me by now. I don't agree with my dad. I feel like this is an incredibly sensitive topic, and Will should share it with me when he feels ready, not because I push him to. I suspect Will knows I'm aware of his dad's passing, as there are several tributes to his dad in his home, and it's not exactly a secret within his family. But I think he finds it hard to talk about, and I don't want to pressure him into having that conversation before he's comfortable. This week marks the 3rd anniversary of his dad's passing, and I've been trying to be extra supportive without explicitly bringing it up. My dad, however, is still upset that I haven't told Will I already know. He thinks I'm being dishonest and says it's unfair to Will to keep this from him. On top of that, my friend Nadia, 16F, also got involved, though I didn't tell her the full story. I vaguely mentioned that I know something about Will that he doesn't know I know, and she jumped to conclusions. She started accusing me of being a bad girlfriend for keeping this a secret from Will. Now she's gossiping about me to our friend group, and things are getting messy. Our group of 9 friends is now divided. 2 are fully on my side, 3 are undecided, and the other 3, including Nadia and her boyfriend, have taken to vague posting about me on their Instagram stories. Nadia's reaction confuses me even more because she has a complicated history with Will. There's some backstory between her boyfriend, and, well, that's too long to explain here. To be clear, I'm not hiding this out of malice or because I don't care. I just feel like this isn't my story to bring up. It's Will's. If and when he's ready to tell me, I want to be there for him. But I also don't want to make him feel pressured or awkward by saying, "Oh, by the way, I already know." That just seems like it could make an already painful topic even harder for him. At the same time, with everyone around me saying I'm being disrespectful or dishonest, I'm starting to question myself. Am I handling this the wrong way? Would it be better to clear the air and tell him I already know? Or should I stick to my gut and let him decide when and if to share this part of his life with me? So, would I be the asshole for not telling my boyfriend that I know about his dad's passing before he chooses to tell me himself? Am I the asshole for alternating between sitting next to my boyfriend and my best friend at an amusement park? So, I, 21F, recently went on a yearly trip to an amusement park with a group of friends. This tradition includes my 2 friends, a couple, and my best friend. It's always been a fun outing we all look forward to. This year, I decided to invite my boyfriend, 26M, to join us. I checked with everyone beforehand to make sure they were okay with him coming along, and they were all excited about it. Now, here's the situation. Since my 2 friends are dating, it's naturally assumed that they would sit together on rides with 2 seats per row. That left me with the choice of sitting next to either my best friend or my boyfriend. To be fair and ensure no one felt left out, I came up with a plan to alternate who I sat next to on each ride, switching between my best friend and my boyfriend. Before we even bought the tickets, I told my boyfriend about this plan. I explained that I wanted to include everyone and avoid leaving my best friend to ride solo. The entire day, he said he was fine with the arrangement, so I thought it was a non-issue. The day of the trip, we followed the plan. I alternated who I sat next to on each ride. Between rides, my boyfriend and I held hands, chatted, and generally acted like we normally do. Most of the day was spent walking around together or waiting in line, so it felt like we were all spending time as a group. Everything seemed fine, and there were no signs that anyone was upset. However, on the car ride home, I noticed that my boyfriend was acting distant and seemed to be in a bad mood. I asked him if something was wrong, and his response was, "Yeah, fine. I just can't believe I came all the way down here just to spend only half of the day with you." His tone made it clear that he wasn't fine, so I reminded him of our conversation before the trip. I pointed out that he had agreed to the arrangement and that, technically, he spent more time with me than not since the rides only last a few minutes while most of the day was spent walking and hanging out. He told me I was invalidating his feelings and then asked why my best friend couldn't have just ridden by herself on every ride. That comment threw me off because it felt unfair. My best friend is just as much a part of this trip as anyone else, and I didn't want to exclude her or make her feel like a third wheel. I thought alternating seats was a reasonable compromise to balance everyone's needs and ensure we all had a good time. Now, I'm second-guessing myself. My boyfriend is clearly upset, and I don't want him to feel like I don't value him. But at the same time, I don't think it would have been fair to leave my best friend out or make her feel like a tag-along. So, am I the asshole for splitting my time on the rides between my boyfriend and my best friend, even though my boyfriend agreed to this plan beforehand? Am I the asshole for not inviting a friend to my wedding after saying I would? I, 26F, am getting married to the love of my life next year, and I couldn't be happier. It's been a long engagement, so I've had plenty of time to plan and think through the guest list. The issue involves a friend of mine. Let's call her Emma, 24F. Emma and I met last year during a 4-month certification program. From the moment we met, we clicked and became fast friends. I was more experienced in the program, so I helped her with material and shared notes, which strengthened our bond. Beyond the coursework, we connected on a personal level as well. We have a lot of shared interests and come from similar cultural backgrounds, a rarity where we live, so we were able to support each other through some tough personal situations during that time. We spent a lot of time together both in and outside of class, met each other's friends, and grew really close in a short period. When the program ended, Emma moved away for a year to pursue another diploma. Before she left, we had a heartfelt goodbye, and I told her that I'd love for her to attend my wedding in the future. I also mentioned that I'd keep her posted once the plans were set. She seemed enthusiastic, and we promised to stay in touch. After Emma moved, things changed. I would reach out to her often, but her responses became sporadic. Sometimes, she'd reply weeks later, saying she was overwhelmed with work. However, her social media told a different story. She frequently posted about being out with new friends or attending events. I understand that people get busy, so I tried to be understanding. Before a trip I had planned near her area, I asked her several times about her availability so I could coordinate a visit. Each time, she'd respond with something vague like, "I'll let you know," but never followed up. I eventually stopped trying to reach out because it felt like the effort was one-sided. It's been over 6 months since I last heard from her, and honestly, I assumed our friendship had faded. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, when I sent out wedding invitations. My fiancé and I are having a relatively small wedding, with only close friends and family. Since Emma hadn't been in touch and didn't seem invested in our friendship anymore, I didn't think it made sense to include her on the guest list. Out of the blue, Emma messaged me recently saying she was so excited to attend the wedding and had already picked out what she'd wear. I was shocked because I hadn't sent her an invite, nor had we spoken in ages. Gently, I explained that it was going to be a small wedding and that I hadn't invited her. I also mentioned that since I hadn't heard from her in months, I assumed she wouldn't be interested. She didn't take it well. She called me insensitive and said I was being unfair. She explained that she's been swamped with work and barely has time to breathe, which is why she didn't reach out. She accused me of excluding her after previously inviting her and called me an asshole for not understanding her situation. Now I'm confused. I genuinely didn't think she cared about maintaining the friendship, given her lack of effort to stay in touch. It never occurred to me that she'd be this upset about not being invited. Was I wrong to assume the friendship had faded? Should I have included her on the guest list because of my earlier informal invitation? I'm starting to question whether I handled this poorly or if her reaction is unreasonable. So, am I the asshole for not inviting her to my wedding after saying I would? Am I the asshole for fighting with my boyfriend about staying out late with his friends? I'm not sure if I worded the title correctly, but here's what happened. My boyfriend, 26M, and I, 22F, have been in a relationship for about a year. Overall, things have been good between us, but we've had some tension over his late nights out with friends. To give some context, my boyfriend occasionally goes out, not too often, to hang out with his friends. They usually meet up at one of their houses or go out somewhere together. These hangouts often start at night and last until the early hours of the morning, sometimes as late as 2 or 3 a.m. We've talked about this before because I've mentioned that I don't like when he's out so late. He also doesn't like it when I stay up late talking or going out. For example, about a week ago, I stayed up until 4 a.m. talking to my cousin at home, and he said he wasn't happy about it. I feel like that's a bit hypocritical since he regularly stays out late with his friends. Last night, one of his friends who lives far away was back in town for the holidays. My boyfriend went out to play soccer with him and their other friends in the evening, and then he told me they'd hang out afterward to catch up. I don't have an issue with that. I don't want to control him or stop him from seeing his friends. He came home at 2 a.m., and while I didn't say anything to him right then, I felt upset. It's not about mistrust. I trust him completely and know he'd never cheat or get into trouble. But I can't help feeling hurt when he's out so late. I think part of it might be trauma from my past relationship where I was cheated on. Even though I logically know this isn't the same situation, those feelings still linger. To complicate things further, I've been going through a really tough time lately. About a week ago, I had to have an abortion. It was a mutual decision, and I know it was the right thing for us, but it's been incredibly hard for me emotionally. I feel like I'm barely coping some days. I've told him how I feel and we've talked about it, but I don't think he fully understands how much I'm struggling. When he went out last night, I couldn't shake this feeling of resentment. I don't even want to go out or do much because I'm so down, and it felt like he was able to just move on and have fun while I'm still processing everything. It made me question whether he truly grasps how much this has affected me. At the same time, I don't want to be unreasonable. I know he deserves to spend time with his friends and unwind, and I don't want to make him feel controlled or guilty for doing that. But I also can't help feeling like my emotions are being overlooked, especially right now. I'm torn because I don't know if I'm overreacting or if my feelings are valid. Do other people feel like this when their partner stays out late? Am I being ridiculous for being upset when I know he's just spending time with his friends? I'm also mad at myself for being so angry at him. It feels irrational, but I can't seem to shake it. I really need some advice on whether I'm justified in how I feel or if I'm blowing this out of proportion. Also, for anyone who might judge, the abortion was a mutual decision that had to be made, and I don't regret it. Please respect that this is a sensitive topic for me. Would I be the asshole with my secret Santa gift? Hi everyone. I'm a 24-year-old woman, and I currently work at a retail job. This is my very first Christmas with the team I'm on, and I recently found out they have a tradition of doing a secret Santa gift exchange every year. Naturally, I decided to join in because I wanted to participate and bond with my coworkers. When I drew my recipient's name, I was thrilled to see it was a coworker I get along pretty well with. We're not super close friends, but we are what I'd call smoking buddies. Basically, we'll step outside together for smoke breaks in the mornings and have casual conversations. She's someone I genuinely enjoy talking to, which made me excited to put thought and effort into her gift. I had already participated in another Secret Santa earlier this season, and for that one I made a fleece tie blanket. It worked out really well because there was a big sale at the local craft store, and I was able to grab some fleece fabric that fit within the $25 spending limit. The blanket turned out adorable and everyone loved it, so I thought, why not do it again? It's a personal, handmade gift that I can tailor to each person's tastes. Now, here's where things get tricky. This particular coworker once shared something very personal with me. A few years ago, she experienced a devastating life event that left a lasting impact on her. While she didn't go into all the details, she did tell me that butterflies have become a meaningful symbol for her because they remind her of the loved one she lost during that time. When I started brainstorming her blanket, I knew her favorite color was purple. So one side of the blanket was a no-brainer. I picked out a gorgeous solid purple fleece for that. But then I got stuck on what to use for the second side. I wanted it to be fun, creative, and personal to her. That's when I had the idea to ask her a question during one of our breaks. I casually brought up the topic by saying, "If you could be any animal in the world, what would you be?" She thought about it for a moment and then said, "Probably a dragon, an elephant, or maybe a monkey." That gave me a clear direction. I'd find fleece with one of those animals on it to make her blanket special. Fast forward to a few weeks later. I was scrolling through the craft store app and found the perfect elephant pattern. It was super cute, and I was so excited to use it. I planned to head to the store that weekend to grab it. But when I got there, disaster struck. The elephant fleece was completely sold out. I searched high and low in the store, checked every shelf, and even asked an employee if they might have any in the back. No luck. I was honestly so frustrated because I had my heart set on that pattern. After some time wandering the aisles, I spotted another option, a purple butterfly patterned fleece. At first, I hesitated because I wasn't sure if using butterflies, given their deeply personal meaning to her, would be crossing a line. I stood there for what felt like forever, going back and forth in my head. Part of me thought, it's beautiful, and it's the only pattern here that feels remotely fitting. But another part of me worried, what if this brings up difficult emotions or makes her feel sad instead of happy? Eventually, I convinced myself it was meant to be. I thought, if this is the only fabric left that works, maybe it's a sign I'm supposed to use it. So I bought it and went home to finish the blanket. Now that it's done, I have to admit, it looks amazing. The purple side and the butterfly side complement each other perfectly, and I'm really proud of how it turned out. However, as the Secret Santa exchange approaches, it's on Monday, I can't shake this nagging feeling that I might have made the wrong choice. Am I overthinking this? Or would giving her this blanket with the butterfly pattern make me an asshole? I truly want her to feel appreciated and cared for with this gift, not upset or uncomfortable. I'd hate for her to think I crossed a boundary or was being insensitive. Please, help me figure this out. Sincerely, a scared Secret Santa. Am I the asshole for quitting my grandmother's cooking lessons? I'm a 25-year-old guy, and I've been living with my mom for several years. About 6 months ago, my grandmother, who's in her 80s, moved in with us. She was coming from a really bad living situation, and my mom wanted to help her out. While I completely understand why my mom made this decision, I was hesitant about it. My grandmother and I have never gotten along very well. She has a very different personality from mine, and we tend to clash a lot. To give some context, my grandmother is one of those people who expresses love through criticism. She's always making little comments about my life, and a lot of it feels intrusive. She'll bring up things like my weight, my eating habits, my smoking, I vape, and yes, I know it's bad for me, and pretty much anything else she finds fault with. I know she means well, but it can be exhausting. One of her biggest issues with me is my eating habits. I'm autistic, and one of the challenges I deal with is being extremely sensitive to certain food textures. Some foods are just really hard for me to eat, and I can't always predict what will set me off. For example, if the texture is too slimy or mushy, I physically struggle to swallow it without gagging. My grandmother has trouble understanding this and often gets upset if I don't eat the food she cooks. Even though I always try a bite of everything, sometimes I just can't handle the texture, and that seems to hurt her feelings. To avoid conflict, my mom and I keep a stash of backup food, like frozen chicken nuggets, for nights when I can't manage what's on the menu. It's not a perfect solution, but it helps me stay nourished and avoids making dinner into a battleground. Recently, my grandmother came up with an idea that she thought would solve my picky eating problem. She offered to teach me how to cook the foods she makes, thinking that if I learned how to make them myself, I'd be more willing to eat them. I agreed because I figured cooking is a valuable skill, and I might as well try to bond with her over something positive. We set up a schedule where I wrote my name next to certain meals, indicating the nights I'd help her cook. However, the lessons haven't been what I expected. Instead of actually teaching me step by step, my grandmother mostly has me stand next to her while she rambles about her cooking philosophy. When I ask questions, like how much of an ingredient to use, she brushes me off with vague answers like, "Oh, just a pinch of this," or "You'll know when it looks right." I've tried to make the best of it, but honestly, I haven't learned much, and it's been pretty frustrating. Fast forward to today. Lately, I've been dealing with the unpleasant symptoms of detoxing. I had been smoking weed heavily for a long time, and I recently realized how much it was affecting me. I made the decision to quit cold turkey, threw out all the weed I owned, and started the process of getting back into therapy to deal with the underlying issues. But as anyone who's been through it knows, detoxing can make you feel like absolute garbage. Today was one of those days where I felt completely drained, physically and emotionally. When I looked at the schedule, I realized I was supposed to help my grandmother cook dinner tonight. Knowing how irritable and unwell I felt, I decided it would be better to avoid the situation entirely. I told her I wasn't up for cooking that night and crossed my name off the schedule for that meal. I thought I'd handle it diplomatically by moving my name to another recipe later in the week. Unfortunately, my grandmother didn't take it well. She got really angry and told me that my detox symptoms weren't her problem, which is fair, and that if I didn't help her cook, I wouldn't be allowed to eat dinner, also fair, I guess. I told her that was fine. I could just eat some chicken nuggets instead, but the whole exchange left me feeling hurt. After that, I started thinking about whether I even wanted to continue the cooking lessons at all. The truth is, they've been more stressful than enjoyable, and I feel like I haven't gained much from them. On top of that, her reaction today made me question whether it's worth putting myself in situations that lead to arguments. I decided to ask my mom if she would teach me how to cook instead. My mom agreed, so I went to the schedule and crossed my name off entirely. Now, I'm wondering if I handled this poorly. My grandmother's upset, and I feel bad about it because I know she genuinely wanted to connect with me through these lessons. At the same time, I feel like I tried my best, and it's not my fault that our approaches to cooking and communication are so different. My mom says she sees both sides. She understands why I feel the way I do, but also sympathizes with my grandmother, who might feel rejected. So, here I am, turning to Reddit to ask for an honest verdict. Am I the asshole for backing out of today's cooking lesson and then removing myself from the schedule entirely? I'm worried I may have overreacted or hurt my grandmother's feelings unnecessarily. Would I be the asshole for refusing to pay for my hair to be done for a friend's upcoming wedding? Let me set the stage for you. I am a 27-year-old woman, and in less than a week, I'll be standing as a bridesmaid at my friend's wedding. This is not a grand, luxurious event. It's a small, intimate wedding on a tight budget. I don't say this in judgment. I'm just giving you the full picture to understand the situation. Despite the simplicity of the wedding, it involves 6 bridesmaids, including myself. From the start, we bridesmaids have been covering most of the costs related to our involvement. The bride did contribute $100 toward each of our dresses and also covered the cost of any alterations we needed, which I appreciated. However, beyond that, we've been responsible for funding everything else: our shoes, bags, jewelry, and other required accessories. And yes, there were specific requirements for the color and style of each item, so it wasn't as though we had much freedom to use items we already owned. For the big day, we've all been tasked with doing our own makeup, which I was fine with. I'm no makeup artist, but I can handle the basics, and I appreciated that it saved us from an additional expense. Up until recently, I had also assumed we'd be doing our own hair. The bride requested that we all wear soft curls, and as someone who is perfectly capable of curling my own hair, this seemed manageable. But then came the surprise. I learned a few days ago that the bride has booked professional hairstyling appointments for all 6 of us on the day of the wedding. Not only that, but we're expected to pay for it ourselves, at a cost of $150 each. I was taken aback, not just by the price but also by the fact that we weren't even consulted before the bookings were made. One of the other bridesmaids, who is currently unemployed, reached out to the bride to explain her financial situation. She mentioned that she couldn't spare $150 during the holiday season, especially not for something she could do herself. She even pointed out that she had done her own hair for her own wedding, which also involved soft curls. However, the bride responded by saying that getting our hair done professionally was non-negotiable. Now, here's where things get tricky. I firmly believe that if I'm the one footing the bill, then yes, it is absolutely negotiable. Several of the other bridesmaids agree with me and have expressed frustration about the lack of communication. Given that we've already spent so much on this wedding, being blindsided by an extra $150 expense feels unfair. We've tried suggesting compromises, like doing our own hair but adhering to her desired style. But the bride has been adamant that we all go to the stylist she booked. The tension is palpable, and it's only days before the wedding. I've spoken to a few people outside the bridal party about this situation, and the reactions have been mixed. Some were shocked that bridesmaids are expected to pay for anything wedding-related at all, while others said this is just part of the deal when you agree to be a bridesmaid. However, I'd like to point out that I was never formally asked to be a bridesmaid. I was more or less told I would be one, but that's another story entirely. Having never been in a bridal party before, I genuinely don't know what's considered normal. Is it standard for bridesmaids to cover all these expenses? Is it fair for a bride to dictate additional costs without consulting her bridal party first? Am I in the wrong for feeling blindsided and wanting to refuse? Here's an update on the situation. After some digging, I managed to track down the hairstylist the bride booked. I found out that she does indeed charge $150 per person for soft waves at bridal events. Apparently, this is the so-called wedding tax, because for non-bridal events, the same stylist charges only $70 for soft waves. While it was a relief to learn that we weren't being overcharged to cover the bride's own hairstyling costs, it still left me questioning the logic behind her refusal to let us opt out. To add salt to the wound, I compared her prices to a few other salons in the area and found that $150 is still $50 more than the average rate for the same service. At this point, I feel justified in not wanting to pay. I can't help but feel frustrated. Not just about the expense, but about the principle of being told I have no choice in the matter. So, would I be the asshole if I stood my ground and refused to pay for professional hairstyling on the wedding day? Am I the asshole for not buying a coffee maker for guests? Let me start by saying that neither my husband nor I drink coffee. We don't own a coffee maker, keep coffee beans, or have any other way to prepare coffee at home. It's just never been something we need in our lives. My husband has a good friend who lives hours away, and because of the distance, he only sees him in person once every year or two. When this friend visits, he usually brings his girlfriend along. They've stayed with us a couple of times now, and this issue with coffee has come up both times. The first time they stayed with us was last year, for a few days. Before their visit, I made a point to ask if there were any specific foods or drinks they wanted stocked for their stay. I even gave them a rundown of what we typically have in the house so they'd know what to expect. They didn't make any requests, so I assumed everything was fine. However, on the first morning of their visit, the girlfriend asked for coffee. I told her we didn't have any way to make coffee at home, but I was happy to take her to a coffee shop just 2 minutes away. She declined the offer but seemed visibly upset. Her mood was sour for the rest of the morning. Later in the day, while we were out with mutual friends, I found out through one of them that she was really unhappy about the lack of coffee at our house. Apparently, she needs coffee first thing in the morning, and not having it available was a big deal for her. I felt bad and a little caught off guard. I had asked beforehand if they needed anything specific, but they hadn't mentioned coffee. I thought offering to take her to the nearby coffee shop, even at my own expense, was a decent solution, but she declined every time I offered, leaving me unsure of how to fix the situation. Fast forward to this year. They visited us again, and I still didn't have a coffee maker. To be honest, I never considered buying one. My husband and I don't drink coffee, so it would just be another appliance taking up space in our small kitchen. Storage is already tight, and I can't justify keeping something I'd only use once a year, if that. I figured we'd stick to the same solution as before. If she wanted coffee, I'd take her to the coffee shop. This time, though, things escalated. On the first morning of their visit, the girlfriend once again asked for coffee. When I explained, as before, that we didn't have a coffee maker but I'd be happy to take her to the coffee shop, she flat out called me a bad host. She said I should have planned better, knowing she needs coffee in the morning, and she seemed genuinely offended that I didn't have anything prepared for her. I was taken aback. I felt like I had gone out of my way to accommodate them in other ways. I had cleaned the house, prepared meals, and tried to make them comfortable. But now, her frustration about the coffee situation made me feel like all that effort didn't matter. I don't know what else I could have done. I even offered to buy her coffee during the trip, my treat, just like last year, and she still refused. Here's where I'm struggling. I've talked to a few people about this, and opinions are split. Some people agree with me, saying that since my husband and I don't drink coffee, we're not obligated to keep it in the house, especially for a guest who visits so rarely. But others think I was in the wrong. They've argued that if you host guests, even occasionally, you should have coffee available because it's such a common thing for people to want. They point out that my mom and grandma always had coffee on hand and ready to serve, even for unexpected visitors. That comparison makes me feel guilty, because I grew up seeing that level of hospitality as the norm. For context, I know coffee makers are inexpensive and relatively small. The issue isn't money. It's the lack of space in my kitchen. I'm already short on storage, and I can't justify adding an appliance I'd only use once a year. That's why I thought offering to take her to a coffee shop was a reasonable compromise. But apparently it wasn't enough. So, am I the asshole for not buying a coffee maker and coffee beans, knowing that this guest has a morning coffee routine? Should I have gone the extra mile to make her feel more comfortable, or is it unreasonable for her to expect that kind of accommodation from someone who doesn't drink coffee? Am I the asshole for asking why I was left off a family photo collage? My in-laws are about to celebrate their 30th wedding anniversary, and to mark the occasion, my wife and her siblings decided to create a special gift for them. A large, framed photo collage. It's a thoughtful gesture, and I know they've put a lot of time and effort into it. The collage features an array of meaningful photos. There are, of course, pictures from their wedding day, photos of my wife and her siblings as children, and other family memories. One prominent photo in the collage is the most recent group shot of their entire family, taken at our wedding this past April. In addition, there are individual photos of her 3 married brothers with their respective wives and children, as well as a picture of her recently engaged brother with his fiancée. However, there's no photo of me and my wife together in the collage. Nor do I appear in any of the group pictures, including the family photo from our wedding, which frankly stings a little. Seeing the effort that went into including other spouses and even a newly engaged fiancé made me wonder why I was left out entirely. I brought this up to my wife in what I thought was a calm and neutral way. I said something like, "Hey, I noticed there's no picture of us together in the collage. Was that intentional or just an oversight?" Her immediate response caught me off guard. She sounded annoyed and said, "It's not about you. It's about my parents, my family, and the grandkids." I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to make it about me. I said, "I get that it's about your parents and your family, but I just thought it was worth asking. If there are pictures of your brothers with their wives and kids, shouldn't there also be one of us?" She doubled down. "It's not about my married brothers and their wives. It's about the grandkids." At this point, I felt even more confused. I asked, "Okay, but what about the picture of her recently engaged brother and his fiancée? There aren't any grandkids to show off there, so why were they included?" That's when she got upset. "You know, you're really annoying me right now. My siblings and I worked really hard to put this together, and now you have to make it ALLL about you and the fact that you're not in it. Grow up. You'll be in other pictures in the future." Her reaction hurt more than being left out of the collage itself. I hadn't approached this to criticize her or the work they put into the gift. I wasn't angry or demanding. I was just trying to understand the reasoning behind the choices they made. And instead of a thoughtful conversation, I felt like my feelings were dismissed outright. I want to be clear. I don't think I deserve special recognition, nor do I think this gift needs to revolve around me in any way. But the collage features other spouses, even a fiancé who hasn't officially joined the family yet. So being excluded feels strange. And my wife's reaction makes it harder for me to just let it go. Now I'm questioning myself. Was I out of line for even bringing this up? Should I have kept my feelings to myself? Given that this is a gift meant for her parents and not about me? I don't want to diminish the effort my wife and her siblings put into this, but I also can't help feeling hurt by her response. So, am I the asshole for asking why I wasn't included in the photo collage? Am I the asshole for telling my mom's boyfriend his kids will never be family? A little over a year ago, my mom introduced me to her boyfriend. Since then, our families have been blended, at least on the surface. My mom has 4 kids, including me and my 3 siblings, while her boyfriend has 3 children of his own. Although we live in separate homes, his family is at our house all the time. From the start, it's been glaringly obvious that he has made no effort to include me or my next youngest sibling in any family plans. It feels like we're being intentionally left out, and it's hard not to take that personally. Last Thanksgiving was a breaking point for me. 3 days before the holiday, I found out that my mom, her boyfriend, my 2 youngest siblings, and all of his kids, including his adult child, were traveling 6 states away to spend the holiday with our grandparents. Neither I nor my 17-year-old sibling were invited, or even informed until it was far too late to make arrangements to join them. We didn't have the time or money to pull together a last-minute trip, so we were left behind. When we confronted my mom about it, she shrugged it off, saying, "Oh, I thought you knew. You can come next time." That response crushed me. Thanksgiving isn't just any day, and being left out so thoughtlessly made me feel like I didn't even matter. My sibling and I ended up spending the holiday separately, each going to a distant relative's house, but the pain of being excluded lingered. This wasn't an isolated incident either. Over the past year, my mom and her boyfriend have gone on numerous family trips, often weekend getaways, without telling us until the day of or not at all. It's like we're ghosts in our own family. I tried to let it go. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But with Christmas coming up, I couldn't shake the fear that the same thing would happen again. Thankfully, they didn't exclude us this time, but we were told, rather forcefully, to make sure we bought gifts for his kids because, apparently, they're now our siblings. Let me be clear, I barely know these kids. We aren't close, and it felt incredibly forced to be told I had to get them gifts, especially since my sibling and I have been so blatantly excluded from other family activities. Still, we begrudgingly complied and bought gifts for all three of his kids, including his adult child. Then today, I learned that his kids didn't get us anything. Not even his adult child, who has a job. That was the final straw for me. I snapped. I confronted both my mom and her boyfriend, directing most of my anger at him. I told him I didn't care about him or his kids, and that if he wanted to play family, he was doing a terrible job at it. His response? He said, "I don't need to share my life with adult kids. To me, you're just your mom's past." Hearing that hit me like a ton of bricks. In the heat of the moment, I lashed out. I said things I probably shouldn't have, like telling him his kids were baggage, and that my mom didn't need any more kids. I also told him flat out that I'd never see his spoiled brats as family. My mom started crying, and he screamed at me to leave. So I left. I'm currently staying at a friend's house to cool off and process everything. Here's where I'm torn. I don't care if I was the asshole to my mom's boyfriend. I fully admit that I went for the jugular with my comments, and I don't regret standing up for myself and my sibling. What's really bothering me is whether I crossed a line with my mom. Did I hurt her unnecessarily by saying those things? I want her to know how painful it's been to feel forgotten in her new relationship, but I also don't want to alienate her. She's my mom, and I love her, but it feels like she's prioritizing her boyfriend and his kids over me and my sibling. It's hard enough feeling like an afterthought in your own family, but hearing her boyfriend openly dismiss us as nothing more than her past was devastating. Am I the asshole for proposing in a way that wasn't up to my girlfriend's expectations and refusing to redo it? I, 21M, have been in a relationship with my girlfriend, 21F, for 6 years. We've always talked about getting married in the future, and it was something we both agreed on. Over the Thanksgiving weekend, I planned a surprise trip to Hawaii to propose to her. I had asked her parents for their blessing beforehand and was genuinely excited about this moment. I knew she wanted something grand, like a proposal with big letters on the beach, rose petals, mariachi bands, and all the other flashy elements you often see on TikTok or Instagram. While I was open to this idea, the logistics of doing it in Hawaii, a place neither of us had been to before, just didn't work out. I thought this trip would be a great, intimate opportunity for us to celebrate our relationship. We got to Hawaii, and I had planned to propose on the first day we arrived. But after some arguments and tensions, I decided to hold off. I didn't want to propose after a rough day, so I decided to wait for another opportunity. The second day we went parasailing, and I didn't want to risk losing the ring, so I left it at the hotel. We didn't get back to the hotel until later, and by that point it was already dark. She had mentioned wanting a sunset proposal, but the timing didn't work out, so we just went out for dinner and drinks. We came back to the hotel and she was tired, so I convinced her to go for a walk on the beach at 10:30 p.m. This was the moment I planned to propose. The beach was beautiful. The city lights shone in the distance, and the moonlit ocean made it feel intimate and special. I began telling her how much I loved her and how I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. And just as I reached into my pocket for the ring, she stopped me and said, "I hope you're not about to propose right now. This isn't what I expected." I was devastated. I got up, speechless, and walked back to the hotel. I told her we would talk about it the next day. The following day we had a conversation, and she insisted that I redo the proposal the right way. She wanted me to wait until sunset and make it grand, with all the elements she had envisioned, big letters, a beautiful setting, and everything else. I told her that I couldn't do that because she had already rejected my initial proposal. She insisted that she hadn't rejected it, but that it just wasn't how she had imagined it. Over the next 4 days in Hawaii, we were in a very tense state, but we tried to push through until we got back home. I found myself questioning whether I could stay with her after this, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions just yet. The day after we got back home, she went to stay with her parents for the night. When she came back, we had another conversation. She was still adamant that I failed to meet her expectations. She also told me that a proposal is solely about the woman and what she wants. This didn't sit right with me. I understand that a proposal should be meaningful and that it's an important moment, but I feel like it's something we should both be a part of. Creating. She had expressed in the past that she wanted something intimate and personal, away from the public. But suddenly, she was expecting something elaborate and publicized, based on trends from social media. What bothers me even more is that she says I made the trip seem like just another vacation, nothing special. But this was literally our first ever vacation together, our first flight together, and we had so many amazing experiences. Parasailing, brunch, a fantastic dinner. And yet, because I didn't give her the big, dramatic proposal she envisioned, she felt let down. In another conversation, she told me she wanted the dog to be there for the proposal, which was news to me. She has always said she wants her dog to be the ring bearer at our wedding, but I had no idea she also wanted him there for the proposal itself. I didn't take the dog with us to Hawaii, and I'm just frustrated that she was so focused on these details, rather than just being happy that I wanted to spend my life with her. Update: after everything that happened, we finally had the breakup talk. Here's the thing, my girlfriend has always been a bit self-centered. I've known this and I've been able to put up with it for the most part. But recently, about 4 months ago, she started going to therapy. I've noticed some changes in her behavior. She's become more compassionate and cooperative with me. I was hopeful that this new mindset would last, and I was ready to commit to her fully, believing that the issues we had would improve with time. When I explained the situation to her, she said she talked with her therapist about the proposal. Her therapist asked her, "Do you like surprises?" She said yes, and the therapist reminded her that if I truly loved her, I would try to do something heartfelt and unscripted, not something staged or extravagant. The proposal I planned wasn't about the show or spectacle. It was about us two, sharing a moment together. She apologized, saying that she regretted how she reacted and that she would have said yes anyway. But my biggest regret is that I'll never know what she would have said if she had been truly present and open to the moment. The way she dismissed me at the time, so coldly and disrespectfully, left me feeling hurt and disrespected. I'm standing my ground now. I've swallowed my pride and tried to make things work so many times before. This time, though, I can't do it anymore. She's packing her things, and I'll be sleeping on the couch. It's over. I proposed to my girlfriend of 6 years during a trip to Hawaii, but she rejected my proposal because it didn't meet her expectations for a grand, social media-worthy proposal. She insisted I redo it, but I feel like I can't move forward with her after this. We've broken up now, and I'm questioning if I was wrong for expecting a more genuine reaction instead of the spectacle she wanted. Am I the asshole for snapping at my mother after she missed my graduation? I, 18F, just graduated from high school yesterday, which was a huge moment for me. I've struggled a lot with mental health issues that caused me to miss a year of school, repeat a year, and attend most of my final years online. I'm really proud of myself for how far I've come. I finished this year in second place for most of my subjects. I got an early offer to 2 universities, and I even earned a scholarship. However, my relationship with my mom, 40s, has been strained recently. She has shown a lot of favoritism toward my younger sister, 15F, and has let her treat me horribly without any consequences. For example, my sister once yelled at me while I was having a mental health crisis, and my mom did nothing about it. Yesterday, on graduation day, I went into my mom's room early in the morning, fully dressed, and asked her why she wasn't getting ready. She told me that she had been dealing with a headache for the past 2 days and didn't feel well. I asked her if she would still come to my graduation, and she simply said no. She didn't even say good luck or anything, just continued scrolling on her phone as I walked out. At my graduation, many people asked me where my mom was, and my best friend's parents ended up being the ones to cheer me on. It felt so disappointing that the people who cheered me on during my speech and when I received awards were people I had known for less than a year, rather than my own family. I'm grateful to them for being there, but it still hurt. When I came back home, my mom didn't congratulate me. She didn't even acknowledge my existence until I went into her room later, and she asked me why I was so grumpy. I told her that my feelings were hurt because she didn't come to my graduation. She said, "Sorry, but I don't feel well. I told her that this was a once-in-a-lifetime event and that she had pushed through headaches for my sister before, for much less important things. She's barely spoken to me since. She still hasn't asked me about graduation or showed any interest in how it went. Like she's ignoring me, and I feel really disappointed. Our relationship hasn't been the same for a while, and I miss the connection we used to have. My older sister, 21F, told me I should just let it go since my mom said she was sorry and didn't feel well. But I don't feel like a sorry can fix this. Just 2 months ago, my mom sat in a hot car for an hour after being sick for a week to attend an information session for my younger sister, who didn't even show up. But she couldn't make the effort to attend my 1-hour graduation, which was in an air-conditioned hall. So, AITA for snapping at my mom and feeling hurt over her absence at my graduation? I am scared to break up with my first girlfriend. Hey, I, 25M, started dating a girl from Tinder in August, 24F. To give some context, she was my very first. And I mean not just first girlfriend overall, but my first sex partner that I lost virginity with as well. It's not that there is something horribly wrong with me compared to other guys, but I had some high school trauma, and once I didn't lose it at 19 or so, I became afraid of intimacy. I tried not minding too much, but once I finished university, it started driving me mad. Last summer, I even hired a hooker and couldn't get it up because of how stressed out I was. So eventually, extremely desperate, I swiped right on a bigger girl on Tinder that I normally wouldn't do. We started meeting up, and I found that she has similar interests like me in history and D&B/techno events, so I kept it going and thought that maybe we can just work out the physical part. She was eager to start going to the gym with me where I was a regular. Fast forward to now, and the spark is gone. We are still seeing each other in gym, but she always seems like she is just trying to get out of there as soon as possible. Like she is there just for me and not because she wants to, even though she says otherwise. I am not physically attracted at all at this point. We also had a sickness period where we couldn't see each other for about 3 weeks, and she acted extremely insecure and needy every day, and it was just annoying to me. In fact, she is insecure a lot of time, even though I was not doing anything to make her feel that way, and it is extremely unattractive to me. Don't try to hit me with the LOL girls are insecure bro, deal with it stuff, because that is not an excuse. Another problem is her attitude. I am a go-getter. I wake up at 6, travel for almost 2 hours to work and back. I come back after 11, 5 hours, still have time to go get some groceries, still have time to hit gym for at least an hour, still have time to play a bit of video games, take a shower, and even give some time to my side only business I have. Really small, though it makes money. Yet this girl has the gall to tell me on her day off, after waking up at 9 a.m., that she doesn't have the time to do everything she wants, which was cook a healthy meal, meet up with friend, paint a picture, and go to gym. Like what? If you asked me, Toady, if this is the girl I want to marry one day, then the answer is no. I feel no attraction physically or mentally, and I'm even trying to get out of having sex lately. But I'm also scared. I feel indebted to her for huge favor she has done to me. Feels wrong to just take and leave. But I also feel that there must be someone better for me out there. On the brink of divorce, I, 34F, have been dealing with my husband's, 34M, criticism and suspected OCPD. I'm writing this in a state of desperation, hoping for some clarity or to hear if anyone can relate to what I'm going through. My husband, M34, and I, F34, have been together for 9 years, married for 5. Over the past year, we've been on the brink of divorce, and I don't know where to turn anymore. Recently, I started suspecting that my husband might have obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, OCPD, which my therapist has suggested could be at play. This has made me reevaluate everything I've been feeling and experiencing, and I'm hoping some insight from others might help me find clarity. Our relationship has always had its ups and downs, but this last year has been particularly difficult, with frequent conflicts. Sometimes every few days, sometimes daily. Something about our relationship has always felt off to me, though I couldn't put my finger on it until now. My husband is a great person in many ways, emotionally attuned, loving, caring, and considerate. We've had big dreams for the future. Starting a business, having children, and growing old together. However, these plans have remained on hold, as we've spent most of our time trying to work on our relationship, especially with a focus on me. For context, I've been a recovering alcoholic. I was still drinking on and off during our first year together, but after our first anniversary, I quit for good and have been sober ever since. My husband has been an incredible support through that process, but I feel like I'm being continuously scrutinized, not just for my past, but for my ongoing struggles in adjusting to this new identity as a non-drinker. The issue started when I noticed how my husband began to nitpick almost every aspect of our lives, including how I do everyday tasks like making coffee, loading the dishwasher, and even how I walk, talk, or express myself. He often tells me I'm too timid, that I don't speak up enough, and that I'm not assertive enough. Over the years, I've tried my best to work on these things, but it's never been enough. In fact, it's become overwhelming. I recently sat down and made a list of all the things he's criticized me for over the years, and I easily came up with over 100 distinct issues. Things as small as how I express my emotions, the tone of my voice, and the way I interact with people. Everything has been scrutinized. I'm fully aware of my own challenges in relationships. I have an insecure/avoidant attachment style, which has made intimacy and vulnerability difficult for me. I know my struggles in expressing affection and being physically intimate with him have created tension. I've worked hard to understand his love languages, especially physical touch and emotional connection, and tried to show more affection, but every attempt seems to fall short. He criticizes my touch, my attempts at affection, telling me they come off as too unsure, and that it's unappealing. He also says I lack expressiveness and that I don't show love in the way he needs. I've been trying to learn and change, but the constant feedback is exhausting and makes me feel like no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. There have been countless instances where I've tried to compliment him, only for him to thank me but say I didn't express it right. He wants me to communicate better, be more expressive, and speak with more energy. He tells me that I'm too monotone, that my voice lacks inflection, and that I'm not sounding enough. Even when I make significant progress in these areas, his criticism remains constant, and it's become draining. When I make a mistake, whether it's something about my tone, my communication style, or any other minor issue, he's extremely critical, and instead of acknowledging my efforts to improve, he becomes frustrated. What makes this worse is that when I try to share my perspective, especially when I don't agree with his criticism, he completely shuts down. He tells me that I'm the problem, that I've caused him pain for years, and that he doesn't have the patience to hear my side of things. He believes that his feedback is objective and that my perspective is invalid, and he refuses to take any responsibility for his own role in our issues. I'm constantly told that I'm at fault for everything in the relationship because I lack basic communication and emotional connection skills. The impact this constant criticism has had on me over the years has been profound. My self-esteem is in tatters, and I often feel completely unlovable. He's told me that if he had known how broken I was, he probably wouldn't have gotten into a relationship with me in the first place. This has left me feeling rejected, defective, and emotionally drained. Recently, in one of our arguments, he called me stupid and an idiot for not agreeing with him, saying I can't understand basic logic. When I tried to explain how hurtful these comments were, he said it was inhumane for me to deny him the right to express himself, even if it's damaging to me. I'm struggling with whether this constant criticism is an effect of OCPD or if we're just stuck in a toxic, unhealthy relationship dynamic. He's often fixated on having things done in a very specific way, whether it's daily routines or interpersonal interactions. He's also become very judgmental of other people, cutting out friends and family members because they don't live up to his standards. He's even said he has had OCD-like tendencies when he was younger, but he doesn't seem to think it's an issue now. For the past couple of years, the emotional toll of living under this scrutiny has been unbearable. I feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Even when I try to meet his needs, it's as if nothing I do is ever right. I've explained how his behavior is damaging to me, but it always seems to fall on deaf ears. I'm constantly blamed for everything and made to feel like I'm the cause of all of our issues. The worst part is, after yet another fight over a mistake I made, he's now refused to speak to me for over 2 weeks. I've tried reaching out a few times, extending olive branches, but he continues to shut me down. I don't know if I'm just in denial or if I'm missing something, but I feel emotionally drained, unworthy of love, and completely lost in this relationship. I know we've had our good moments, but I wonder if this constant cycle of criticism, rejection, and emotional neglect is something I can keep enduring. I'm exhausted by the idea that everything falls on me and that my efforts are never enough. So, here I am, looking for any kind of insight or advice. Could my husband have OCPD? Are we just in a terrible dynamic that can't be fixed? Has anyone been through something similar? Am I misinterpreting everything, or is this really a situation where I'm being emotionally gaslit and neglected? I just don't know what to do anymore, and I feel lost. We were death partners before we were friends. The day we met some 30 years ago, I was so pregnant with my first child. I resembled an overstuffed sausage about to burst its casing. I'd forsaken style weeks earlier when my shoes no longer fit. I couldn't even reach around my massive torso to shave my legs, limbs sporting enough hair to scrape clean a barbecue grill. You, on the other hand, had just wrapped up an open house and strode across my threshold for the first time, like a seasoned runway model. I'll never forget your chic, black pencil skirt, topped with one of those mustard-hued, real estate jackets you somehow made fashionable, while pivoting on heels resembling knitting needles. Your cropped, platinum hair parenthesized the diamond studs that shimmered from your ears. Your teeth were straight and white as a toothpaste commercial. I caught the subtle scent of an expensive perfume. The last fragrance I'd worn was surreptitiously torn from a magazine in my obstetrician's office. Our husbands, officers and gentlemen of the highest caliber, lost all decorum, leaving us post-introductions in the foyer, off to the den to watch football. Afraid they'll miss a Doritos commercial. You winked at me. I'm so envious, you said. You look amazing. I caught a hint of a southern accent. I stepped forward and stumbled over nothing, as usual, and you gracefully caught me. Sorry, I'm so clumsy these days. Istutil. Oh, darling. I trip going upstairs. A loose cord my foot inevitably tangles in it. I get it, and I don't have a bowling ball around my abdomen. You took my elbow. Here, let me help you. Kitchen's good. Let's sit in the kitchen. If weasels could talk, they'd sound like me. You seemed so sincere. I could have wept in gratitude, but lately I cried at tissue commercials. This get-together was our husband's idea. It made me very nervous, the entire reason we needed to meet. Spooning one night with Jimmy, my only go-to position those pregnant days, he broached the subject. At first, I was incensed at the entire morbid concept. Jimmy had chosen you and Ken had chosen me. While he twisted a random strand of my hair, he went on to explain that your dad had been a CIA agent, and you personally knew the likes of Oprah and Hillary. I'll admit I was intrigued. He added that, at some point, you'd owned an upscale bar in Georgetown and fell for Ken, a fighter pilot, years your junior, and gave up all that DC glamour for places named Raison and Beeville. I was fascinated by the idea of you, so I agreed. Ken and Jimmy were more than just fighter pilots stationed in the same squadron. They'd become close friends, having spent the previous 6 months together on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Our meeting was essential to the cause. Technically speaking, we were an assignment of theirs which they mandatorily had to carry out. Their detachments were intensifying. They needed us to like each other. Meanwhile, you cursed like a pirate, housed enough gossip to warrant your own radio show, and fiercely loved your man. Within a half hour, I was putty in your palms. We laughed about things as if we'd been friends for years. You made the extreme business at hand less overwhelming. While the guys watched television, we sat in my tiny, sunny kitchen and reviewed the government-issued paperwork in front of us. Form DD 193 was mandatory for married officers in Special Ops. Signing these forms meant one of us would be present if the other was informed her husband was killed in action. You and I were total strangers discussing a contract where we'd bear witness to each other's worst nightmare. Before signing, you took my hands in yours. I know we just met, but you need to know something. Your tone was hushed, your hands warm, and momentarily, I was both comforted and confused. If uniforms show up at my door flanking you, I'll know because they only come in person if your husband is dead. Injured, they'll call. And let's get real. Who simply gets injured should something go awry in a jet traveling 1,500 miles an hour? You sighed and I felt myself stiffen. I feel obligated to inform you before you sign on. Should I see you at my door, flanked by uniforms, I will simply excuse myself, get Ken's gun, put the barrel in my mouth and pull the trigger. Discussion is off the table. I gasped. I knew you less than an afternoon and you were serious. You continued. Something about Ken being your universe. Not wanting to live in a world without him. Promise never to tell anyone, especially Jimmy. In utter shock, I reluctantly nodded. You let go of my sweaty palms, flamboyantly scratched your signature on the bottom of your copy of DD 193, grinned and slid it over as though you just sold me a duplex. That day, we passed bits of ourselves back and forth like poker chips. I was intoxicated by your this and that of such minutiae as your latest guacamole recipe, the upcoming masquerade gala, and the commander's wife who thinks she shits ice cream. Yet somehow, I read through your gregariousness. At one point you asked to touch my belly, because all you really wanted to know was what it felt like to be pregnant. I placed your delicate hand on the wave of my abdomen. Something more than my baby swelled inside me that afternoon. It was the seedling of our friendship. Early on, you confided in me that you couldn't have children. Your mother had taken a prescribed drug during her only pregnancy that ultimately killed the poor woman and robbed you of a mom and a uterus. I felt pain in my heart. To my very core, I had no words, not like you. All I said was, you'd make an amazing mom. I wish I'd told you then that I was honored to share my children with you. I'd even consider having one for you. But I knew you'd have straight up asked me if you wanted my help, even my viable uterus. And I'd have said, yes. With the certainty I did when Jimmy proposed. When Jimmy and I met in college at 17, he was determined to be a pilot. A true benevolent warrior. He spared spiders, built surprise snow families in the middle of the night, and under his breath whispered 2 points when anything he tossed landed in the trash can. I melted in his arms when his hugs lifted me off the ground. And Jimmy was born to fly. I accepted long ago, as all pilots' wives do, that our husband's first love would always be flight. Over time, the more I understood you, the more your suicide plan simultaneously fascinated and troubled me. Killing myself wasn't an option. I was a mom. But what if I wasn't? Did my not wanting to take that eternal journey with Jimmy mean I loved him less than you loved Ken? Or did it mean I loved myself more than I loved Jimmy? At 24 years old, I hadn't a clue. In the waning hours of lonely nights, I devised intricate scenarios should I have to deliver that fatal news to you. According to Form DD 193, I'd get the call, then I'd be officially escorted door to door, somehow to your whereabouts. I imagined myself physically restraining you. Having garnered strength from childbirth, I'd have a small advantage over you in your stilettos, but I couldn't hang on to you like a chimp indefinitely. Another plan involved somehow confiscating Ken's gun. One afternoon during lunch, I broached the subject of the firearm. Doesn't having that gun in the house frighten you? You shouldn't own a gun unless you know how to use it. Let's go to a range and practice. I'll go with. Your response was not something one soon forgets. I don't need practice when the only target is inside my own mouth. And that was that. While our husbands deployed over those long weeks and months, you and I ran the gamut of emotions. I soon realized that you missed Ken more than I had room to miss Jimmy. Our differences made us a unique pair. In the end, you found family with me. I found my soulmate in you. Am I the asshole for not telling a man that the research he was mansplaining to me was my own? I don't usually post on Reddit, so forgive me if I mess this up, but I could really use some perspective here. I'm a 33-year-old woman working in a very specific, niche field that's male-dominated. I'm not going to name the exact field because it's very technical, and I don't want to accidentally reveal my identity, but let's just say it's a subcategory of law. I've been in the field for 9 years now. We have a different education system where I'm from, so I studied for 5 years, and I'm both a practicing lawyer and a researcher. I've published a bit here and there, though nothing huge or widely known. Most people outside the field don't know about my work. Yesterday, I went out with a few friends to a bar, and they introduced me to one of their other friends who works in the same field as I do. I was actually excited to meet him because it's pretty rare to find someone who works in the same niche area. He's not exactly a lawyer like I am. He's a legal advisor. But we're both involved in similar topics, so naturally we started talking about our work. We eventually started debating a specific issue that we had differing opinions on. I explained my perspective, and that's when he said something that immediately set me off. He told me that my opinion was based on nothing, and that his was based on the work of a professional. He was referencing a paper that he claimed was written by an expert. And you guessed it, it was my paper. He started to mansplain my own work to me, explaining it in a way that was not only wrong, but also showed that he clearly hadn't read it carefully at all. I mean, he completely missed the point of my research. I tried to ask him if he was sure that's what the author meant, and he confidently told me, "It's pretty simple actually." Then, for the next 20 minutes, he went on explaining my research as if he were teaching it to a first-year law student. To be honest, I found the whole thing pretty funny. I didn't say anything because I knew he was completely wrong, and I was curious to see how long he would go on, especially since he was saying everything with so much confidence. Eventually, the conversation shifted to other topics, and the night went on. But right before I left, I decided to tell him that I was actually the one who wrote the work he had just spent the last 20 minutes misrepresenting. He didn't take it well at all. In fact, he got really angry. He yelled at me, saying I had manipulated him and humiliated him on purpose. He said that I should have told him earlier that it was my work instead of letting him go on like that. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just told him that he had embarrassed himself and walked away. This morning, I woke up to a bunch of texts from my friends saying I was in the wrong. They told me that I caused unnecessary drama and tension, and that I could have been nicer to their friend. They said I should have told him at the beginning that it was my work instead of letting him make a fool of himself. But I'm honestly not sure. I mean, yes, I could have told him right away, but is it really that big of a deal that I didn't? I wasn't trying to humiliate him, and to me, the whole thing seemed like a classic case of mansplaining. So, I'm wondering, am I the asshole here? Edit. I just wanted to clarify something that seems to be a point of confusion. The conversation about my work was only between the two of us. We were talking privately, and no one else was involved. My friends weren't around when I told him I was the author. So it wasn't like I was publicly embarrassing him or calling him out in front of a group. The only thing embarrassing for him seems to be the fact that a woman knew more than him, and I suspect that's why he reacted so poorly. The plane hums steadily, a familiar and comforting vibration that thrums through the metal hull. I sit near the open door, and the world beyond sprawls out, a plain of blues and greens. Below, the earth fans out like some vast, intricate map. I lean out a bit, my heart already quickening up with this feeling of thrill that never really goes away no matter how many jumps I've done. It is sweet, electric, a pulse in my veins. There is something rather magical about this view of the world from high up, a bird's-eye view that can connect the ordinary with the extraordinary. Rivers writhe like sinuous serpents, roads slash across a landscape razor-sharp, and fields stretch out in a patchwork quilt of shades of green and gold. I breathe deeply, the thin, icy-cold air filling my lungs, tinged with the metallic smell of the plain, and the promising freedom of the open sky. My fingers itch with the urge to remake this scene below me, to frame the serene beauty and the world's boundless expanses through the lens of my camera. I double-check my gear, a motion that is automatic but necessary. My mind is several steps ahead, already visualizing the perfect shots I'll capture as I plummet through the sky. This time now, the jump master signals. I move toward the door with gusts of wind beckoning me to the world below. The sky opens now, and I let go, surrendering to the pull of gravity. As I leap, the rumbling of the plane's engine fades, replaced by the roaring winds and the sound of my heart thrumming in my chest. Now, the earth below starts to tilt and spin as my fingers tremble in advance for that perfect shot. I've always loved this view of the world. I grab my camera, the extension of my eye, the window to my soul, the kaleidoscope of colors, the hodgepodge of the earth below, and the rolling clouds, so near, one could almost reach out and touch them. With each shot, I line it up precisely and give all the details. I loved the blend of art and adrenaline, just like a maestro conducting a symphony in freefall. There's nothing like taking pictures while flying. At 5,000 feet, I reach for the ripcord, my gloved fingers finding it with the ease of routine. I give it a sharp tug and wait for the mechanical promise of safety to be fulfilled. But nothing happens. I frown and yank it again, harder this time. Still nothing. An icy tendril of dread begins to coil in my chest. 4,500 feet. I grit my teeth and reach for the reserve chute, my mind a well-practiced mantra of calm. I'd be fine. I've never had to use the reserve chute, but I'd be fine. But as I yank on the handle, I feel the same terrifying void of response. No reassuring jolt, no billowing canopy above to halt my rapid plunge toward Earth. Panic, a cold and foreign intruder, claws its way up my spine. It's not fair, I grumble. The wind takes the words. The chances of losing both chutes are almost nil. Yet here I am, free-falling towards an inevitable, unthinkable demise. Never again will I see the twinkle in my daughter's eyes as I tickle her relentlessly. I will not taste the sweet strawberries of Emma's favorite lip gloss on her lips, nor feel the warmth of her breath as she whispers sweet nothings to me in the dark. My ears won't hear my son's excited chatter as he shows me his latest Lego configuration. My nose will never again be graced with the aroma of my wife's homemade cookies. I scream. The sound is stolen by the roaring gusts of wind around me. The cold fingers of fear wrap around my throat, strangling me until I could hardly breathe. But I steel my mind. My last thoughts should be of my family. 4,000 feet. My hands shake now, fumbling for the photos I always carried. Little squares of frozen time, each one a heartbeat of joy and love. I grasp them, the world blurring around me as the descent hums, becoming a simple background to the vividness of my memories. That summer's day in which the leaves beamed with an overspill of sunlight that seemed liquid gold. I remembered that my daughter, Lily, was no older than 5. Her laughter echoed in peals as she ran after butterflies fluttering in the sunlit garden overgrown with flowers. I recalled how her auburn locks were haloed by curls, dancing in the light breeze. I captured her joy, immortalized in just one frame. 3,500 feet. The ground reared up to meet me, an unforgiving canvas of brown and green. My breathing came out in shredded gasps, as my mind became a frantic shudder clicking through the slides of my life. Winter afternoon, the air crisp and biting. Emma was wrapped in a scarf of deepest blue, with color rushing to her cheeks like the cold. We had spent all morning building a snowman, gloves touching while I molded the snow, our laughter mingling with the crystalline silence. I caught her smile, that secret smile that was just for me. A fleeting second of pure, unadulterated love. 3,000 feet. I felt the pull of the earth, this undeniable force of reality encroaching on my reverie. Now, the wind was a howling beast, the sky a vast, uncaring expanse. It was a lazy afternoon. The scent of fresh-baked cookies wafted through the house. My son Jake sprawled on the floor, a puzzle spread out before him. I had knelt beside him, and the warmth of the moment wrapped around us like a soft blanket. I snapped a picture of Jake's concentration, brow furrowed for the serious task of play. 2,500 feet. The details of the ground below sharpen, each second a cruel reminder of my impending fate. But my fingers only tighten around the photos, the lifelines keeping me from madness. The night was starry. The sky seemed like an ocean of diamonds. We all laid down on the grass, with the cool earth beneath us and the universe above us. Lily had pointed out the constellations. Astronomy was her new hobby at the time. Emma's hand found mine, and I had entwined our fingers. I had clicked a picture of that moment, the silhouette of us against the backdrop of eternity. 2,000 feet. A countdown of my life. Every second a beat of a relentless drum. My mind was a whirlpool of images, each one an echo of what I was about to lose. A birthday party. The room ringing with color and laughter. Jake's face was aglow as he blew out the 8 candles. Lily was clapping her hands in delight. Emma had her arms slung over my waist, her head buried into my shoulder. There, in one scene, I had caught it all, love and joy. 1,500 feet. Ground was no longer an abstract term. It was a rapidly approaching fact. My heart raced in my chest, a crazed, desperate rhythm. A family vacation, the beach stretching out in endless waves, the smell of salt and sunscreen, the cries of seagulls wheeling overhead. Lily and Jake were building sandcastles, their laughter mingling with the surf.